Recording.
Yep. 1 second. Okay, you're good.
All right, thank you. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody out to the December 16th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting for North Ogden City. I'm Chairman Thomas. I'll be conducting tonight. We'll begin our meeting from an invocation from myself, followed which being led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Arner. We'll go to that point. Our Father in heaven, we are thankful for this opportunity to gather as citizens of North Ogden and to discuss the concerns and the plans for the future of our city. We ask that thy Spirit may be with us, that we'll be able to discuss the things necessary on the agenda and on our minds, that we'll be able to help the citizens of North Ogden and come together, that we can make plans and organize things as they go forward with the city. We ask that our thoughts will be able to come clearly to us, and those that have questions or concerns, they'll be able to be expressed to both the council and the commission. We thank thee for these opportunities to serve and ask that thou would bless our armed forces and those who serve thee throughout the world. And we ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Commissioner Arner.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, we've got a couple of questions in the chat for those in attendance. I don't know what the screen issue is for people looking different. Does anybody have issues with screen being different?
It's because the folks who are attendees are not allowed to talk.
Oh, not allowed to make adjustments to their screen, the video, and those things. Okay. Yeah. Which goes along with the next question.
Panelist or attendee now.
Okay. Like the next question, you can connect audio to talk. Once we open it up for comment or whatever, if you raise your hand, then Lynn will unmute your mic so that you can speak to us.
We've got Olivia here. I still don't see John Jansen, but we've got Olivia.
Hi, yeah, John just emailed me. He's having some trouble getting in for some reason.
And Lynn, did you promote Phil?
Right now.
Olivia, is he just not able to connect, or can he have able to call in?
It says that he's not being let in, he says. Let me re-grab the link here. Let's see if I can shoot it over to him.
And I think it might be good. Rob could give some of the background on what we're talking about and the reason the group's together, and
Yeah, maybe Rob, will you introduce us to what tonight's joint meeting? Tonight we are Planning Commission and City Council in a joint meeting to discuss the land use code project. Rob, will you kind of maybe just explain a little more in detail for that for those in attendance?
Be happy to. I sent you a staff report that identifies the purpose of this meeting. Actually, we had our first meeting back on April 7th, if you'll remember that. As a part of that, we gave an introduction to the overall project. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to further give you an update and the things that we've accomplished since then. And then we have a few specific policy questions that we would like to discuss with both the City Council and the Planning Commission, so we can get some additional direction. this is not an end-all meeting. We've focused on a couple of issues that we feel are really important in our initial review and in our initial documentation and edits to the overall land use code. So you'll recall that what we're doing here with the land use code is we're combining both our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance into one code. And as such, there's been a number of things that we've done. So I gave you a copy of the outline of the things that we've participated in and what we've accomplished. The first one was that we have some original premises from the city. So John is going to go, he has a PowerPoint that is going to, I don't want to be too redundant with respect to that. So he's going to be covering that. And then one of the other key features of the code has been to take and organize the land use code in such a way that where we have various extraneous but related standards, we've combined those and put them all together in one location. And that in and of itself is going to be a major achievement for both those who are administering the code, staff and so forth, but it also make it a whole lot easier for any applicant who's looking for a particular standard to be able to address particular things. And the last thing are these policy questions that we would like to discuss with you. I also, while we have a minute, Lynn, why don't you just scroll down to where the general plan provisions are located. So I hope that the City Council and the Planning Commission have had an opportunity to take a look at the vision for the city. There's a couple of particular comments here that I think are just worth a reminder. In our first sentence, North Ogden will continue to be a community of beautiful homes and friendly people that capitalizes on the impressive setting beneath the slopes of Ben Lomond Peak. North Ogden will strive to, and then there's quite a long list of things that we would strive to do. The first one is that North Ogden would remain a beautiful place to live, work, and recreate, having a unique downtown that complements the desires of the community with an improved appearance in public spaces. Promote housing variety with a broad spectrum of high quality options along Washington Boulevard, 2700 North, and especially within and adjacent to the downtown and Southtown. So those, I think, are some of the really crucial ones. With that, if anybody had any thoughts relative to those, that would be great as well.
Rob, John has just joined us.
Right. So I'm not sure if maybe I could just introduce John Jansen as one of the lead members of our consultant team who's been working with staff diligently on putting together this new code and what have you. I'm sorry we've kind of gone a little bit over as far as our starting time, but we had planned on about an hour for this initial presentation. So I'm not sure if John is going to share the PowerPoint that he's put together, or if you are going to pull it up. And so, John, what's your preference?
I can do that either way. You do have to give me control, which I'm not sure with a webinar how easy that is, but
It's very, very easy. You let me stop sharing and you can. Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to say share my screen, and just a second here. Sorry about that. I just struggled getting to join you all, unfortunately, but we're here now. So can you all see that now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna get that to be the whole thing. Okay. And I know Rob's done a great intro that I missed, and we'll just jump in here with the PowerPoint. Been contracted with myself and Meg Ryan, Olivia, who's online, I believe, tonight too, from Logan Simpson, Jennifer Gardner, who's over in the Fort Collins office. And we got asked to look at several things with your zoning ordinances. First was looking at state code related items. And actually, sorry, let me start over. I probably am a little flustered with getting in there. So, what we want to do tonight is really just go over what we have done. Make sure everybody's on the same page with state code updates. I know you all have had a lot of training on that, so I hope that'll go fairly quickly. We want to talk about some of the concepts that we've got in this update. And I know you all got a handout from Rob that kind of covers section by section, some of the things that were changed in there and updated. And then at the end, Rob wants to come back and talk about a few issues. So we'll just move on there. Basically, as a team, we went through the entire code and just did state code related comments initially. Looking at the text and just saying, well, that doesn't work with the way state code is now, okay? And then we've been going through this phase for quite a while, making amendments, making changes, actually creating the text that reflects those comments that we had. And eventually we're all going to be involved in the adoption of this. So this is just a little refresher. I know you all have had training on these items in the past because I recall Meg did some kind of training with you down in Moab, for those that were able to make that. So I thought maybe it'd be even easier to do this as a pop quiz, okay? Tell me 3 administrative type decisions you might make in your city. And you have to unmute for that, right? I know you're all thinking, oh, what is that again?
Rezone.
Oh, rezone. Wait a minute. I guess I need a little noise like, eh. Actually, rezone fits in the legislative part. All right. Okay. Let's try another one.
Subdivision approval.
Subdivision is an administrative approval. Yes. Anybody else? Yeah. I can fill in the blanks. How's that? Okay, on the administrative side, subdivisions, as you mentioned, conditional uses, permitted uses. Administrative meaning you have to just follow what you have in your ordinances, okay? On the legislative side, that's the rezones, the general plan related kind of stuff. Text changes like this process we're going through right now for your zoning ordinance. Those are legislative. That's where you have the most discretion as opposed to the least in administrative kind of decisions. So just in the last 15 years, that has been clarified a ton in state law, okay? Big change. I used to think of conditional uses as legislative, and that is just done. So that's an important piece of this and something we try to make very clear as we went through. The legislature has given us more flexibility in how we do our processes, okay? A big distinction between public meetings, where you don't have to solicit input, and public hearings where you do, okay? On the administrative side, those are all public meeting type. You can make them public hearings if you want, but the legislators made it that you don't have to, okay? Why? Because you're following what's in your ordinance. You're not making new law. You're not creating new text or new zones or changing those zones. So administrative just follows what you're doing, what you've got already. They want everybody to go through and make sure everybody understands what kind of decisions that body should make. So that's that clarity of authority. The use of plain language. Essentially, if we don't understand it, the development community doesn't understand it. And if they don't understand it, they get to make their own interpretation. Okay. As Meg would tell you, the tie, meaning you got one opinion, they got another opinion, goes to the runner, and the runner is the developer. So it's an interesting thing. That's another thing that's changed. Pretty much said this already. All the standards you want to put on a particular use, they have to be written in your code. There's no more seat of the pants kind of decision making, except for in those legislative decisions. And so really you get to streamline your process quite a bit. And we made a few suggestions, and you are going to look at a chart later tonight that actually goes through some of that process and decision making. Okay, this is really the slide I started with in my brain anyway. State law compliance is really what we did first. Then we went into all kinds of formatting changes, trying to bring things together so you can find them in one place. And then we've got content kind of changes also, making improvements based on the conversations we've had over the last 8 to 9 months. My first little group of these is conditional uses. So you know that has just changed a ton in the last 15 years. So that's basically been a repeal and replace kind of an effort. The way conditional use works again is you've got to cover the topics that you might want to impose conditions on. They have to be in your ordinance. So it's a bit different than it used to be. Noticing requirements, we're actually putting some of that in the ordinance. Those keep changing, but essentially there is this big difference again between a requirement for public hearings all the time versus you really only have to do those for legislative items. There's a great little phrase in almost all the ordinances that I've looked at lately. It's called at the sole discretion of the Planning Commission. And you had a bunch of those in your ordinance. So if you think about that, what is the criteria for making that decision? It's not defined in the ordinance. It's just saying whatever we think as a planning commission or staff or city council to some extent, whatever we think on that particular day, we can impose that. Well, again, that would be really vague, and that would be really a seat of the pants kind of thing, and that is not really allowed anymore. So we've cleaned that up and tried to give you criteria for those areas where they had that sole discretion kind of statement. We've also done rearranging. Often in ordinances, there's things that were pieces that were created in one year and then the next year, and they're put in different places in the ordinance, and it's hard to figure out what applies all the time and what sections you need to look at. So we've tried to pull those all together. You find a landscape chapter that now has everything together instead of scattered all over the place. Legislature did a couple of updates to the subdivision ordinance, basically on bonding and a few other things, and we have gone through and done those. And let's go to the next one. One of the things that we felt, and I think that at least Meg and I and Logan Simpson feel is important, is you put all the definitions together in one place so you can find them. That made sense to us until we got to the sign ordinance chapter, where you have so many different types that it felt like it just ought to stay there, you know, just to try and make that easier for somebody to wade through that. You had the typical land use table, which, you know, went on for 3 or 4 pages. And we've tried to shorten that up by using categories and generalizing quite a bit more within that table. Eventually, that'll be something that gets looked over by you all. I know one of our original goals was to get rid of all conditional uses, but as we went through that process, we really didn't do that. But there are more permitted uses, okay, which in your case still go to the Planning Commission for that kind of site plan review process. But there are more of those now than there are conditional uses. We have tried to clear up all the roles in the processing. And I think this last one really helps make the ordinance a lot shorter, but is a good one too. We've had this habit in the past of when we have applications and we list, 25 things that have to be in that application in the ordinances. There's really no requirement that that's in the ordinance. So we're suggesting that those happen through the application that's at your counter or online. If you discover when you're talking to a developer that, boy, we really should ask for this other little piece, you don't have to amend your ordinances. You just add something to your application, okay? Makes it much more simple. Puts a little more responsibility on staff to actually go through and make sure that everything is in there that they want. And they want you all to get information on. So improvements. We did get through the noticing and review responsibilities. We've revised and modified, enhanced maybe several of the zones. We are put the site plan reviews with the use reviews in the approval process. I guess sometimes in the past you were doing the use and then coming back with the site plan, but most communities do those together. Theory of that being if you want to impose some conditions, especially with a conditional use, it's usually not on the use itself. It's more on the site plan, the elevations could include the use, but it's usually something that you think needs to be massaged in that site plan, that kind of thing. So those are together in the draft. So more objective subdivision information. Again, there were a fair amount of discretionary statements in there. We've tried to clear that up. Your PUD ordinance, Rob brought that together with the group dwellings ordinance. So those are both together now. We added a few sections, just how do you treat vested rights, which is based on state law. And TZR, could ask for a pop quiz on that, but that one's tough. It's temporary zoning regulations, and that really is a moratorium. So you've got language now in there that says how you do a moratorium. Another way we could shorten up the ordinances is that often we have in the zoning ordinance a set of standards for public works, okay? And then the public works folks, Lauren has his own set of standards in a book, right? So it's much easier for, I think, the zoning ordinance to refer to that instead of trying to list them all out. And then when Lauren wants to change something, he changes it in his set of standards. And you don't have to change it in yours too. Makes it easier. As I said before, landscaping was all over the place, and that's now together. We did some things in the parking chapter to try and simplify that also. More objective standards in the sign chapter. The entertainment zone didn't seem to have a ton of value anymore, so that was dropped. And then we have tightened up your M zone, which is one of your smallest area zones in the city. And just tighten that up in terms of uses. And unfortunately, state law says you got to have something for SOBs, which there's my pop quiz. What is that besides what it really means most of the time? Okay. How about sexually oriented business? Okay, that's fun stuff. But that's the zone. Cities are supposed to have some place where that's allowed. So that's in the M zone. And then last year they added cannabis. Okay. And that's a fancy name for something that showed up at college for me. But okay, hopefully everybody knows what that is. State law required us to talk about growing cannabis and the pharmacies that might distribute. So that's in there. That's new.
A question on that. Are there, for both the sexually oriented businesses and the cannabis,
Yep.
are we required to have a zone where they're allowed? I mean, what was
Yeah.
done? And what is the requirement there?
Yeah, it is. Essentially can't prohibit. So you need to come up with a place where you allow it. All right. So if you think about your zoning map for a minute, you really have a very small manufacturing zone, which I think mostly is occupied by a storage complex at the moment or something along that line. That's where this would be allowed. Okay.
Allowed for commerce, you mean? Obviously not.
Excuse me?
The commerce is what's allowed, not the usage and the.
Oh, right. And this
Oh,
is
usage is
medical,
all
right?
zone.
This is all medical. It's not.
Certainly.
It's not a for fun zone. How's that? It's strictly growing for medical purposes and distribution through a pharmacy for medical purposes. Okay.
Okay, so does the state law require that we put it in a zone, or that we put it in a zone and then that zone is applied to the map? I mean, it's one thing to put it in a zone and call it the Q zone and not actually have anything zoned that way. So what does the statute require us there?
The way that, and sorry, it's been a couple of months since I read that one, but when I read it and in conversations with Meg, who was involved last year a little bit in the legislative stuff through her league role, you have to have a place where it happens. So to me, that means in a zone. Everybody that I know of is choosing the smallest, least potential kind of zone in their community so far. And, I have a limited number that I've been involved in with this, but that's the case. So it's suggested there for the M zone. And you already have uses there. So, I mean, it'd be allowed if there was some way that property owner allowed that to happen there. So does that make sense? Okay. That's, again, is new law as of last year. All right. Okay. Okay. So that's the overall. Is there anything from the handout section by section that you all would want to discuss for a second or two before we get into the policy questions?
John, I wonder if I'd like to get input from the Planning Commission on Commissioner Thomas and mine earlier discussion on trying to streamline how we can comply with ordinances, but help businesses be more attracted to our city. Could you just touch on that? Maybe I'd like to get input from the Planning Commission on their thoughts on that.
Sure. I think one of the things that developers always complain about is the time involved and the uncertainty involved in a lot of city processes. I think we are suggesting a shortened process here, which I think can really help the developers have some interest. More objective standards. That sole discretion thing is not out there anymore. I think that makes a difference for them too. There's a lot of things though that play into that, having a good application so they know what they need to put together to apply. Okay, they don't go to a meeting and then find they have to, come up with 5 different more studies or something. They want to know up front everything that is needed. Applications become important. But I think really the shortening of the time frame, being really clear on what's expected of them, I think that's going to matter an awful lot for the community.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, we're not doing that to encourage more development. We're just saying those that are developing, we want to make sure we don't drag them through unnecessary steps.
Right. I think that is what the legislature would like us to do too. They'd like to make it more flexible. Let's just take the subdivision process for a minute. Usually, most communities do a staff review, then a preliminary plat that goes to planning commission, then it goes to the preliminary plat, goes to city council, then they go back to the planning commission with a final plat, and then back to the city council with a final plat. Legislature said you don't have to do any of that because that's an administrative decision. What we've suggested in here is that the planning commission preliminary plat is the most important stage, and getting through that, then staff could manage, and that's a good policy conversation, getting the final plat finished up, because really you got all the suggestions, all the changes needed happen really at that preliminary plat stage. So the final becomes more of a rubber stamp. So
in my opinion, a more streamlined process actually gives more teeth to declining an application, right? I mean, I just know from me being on the planning commission, it feels like when someone comes back and we're 5 and 6 steps into this, then you're kind of like, well, you know, both parties have invested so much time. It feels like the application is almost inevitably going to happen because we've already met on it 7 or 8 times, right? And I feel like a more streamlined approach we'd have to be stronger up front to decline. I mean, to vet out things we don't want in the city. But then there wouldn't be that looming feeling of, well, you know, we have proved it, you know, at this level and stuff. So doesn't seem like it's an inevitability.
Yeah, Brandon?
It's been brought 12 times to us. Yeah.
You know, one of the other things we've asked to be done is to let the planning commission, so to speak, practice at the top of their license and give more approval ability to staff so that you can deal with the major issues and we can let staff relieve some of those minor issues. So part of the thing we talked about too was empowering them to make some of the decisions that probably are distracting from your major objectives and goals.
Mayor, that's probably a good segue right to the next section. Because I think that's an accurate statement that that flexibility that's been given to us by the legislature, we need to talk about that because it's a big change in our processes. Rob, are you ready for getting into this one?
You bet. Thank you. So in the handout that we gave you, it's on page 4. If you can't read that on the screen, this is our attempt to ensure that people know exactly who it is that's making recommendations on applications, who is the final determiner with respect to applications. So we've given you a table that shows every one of our application types. So if you're coming in for example, for a building permit, you end up as a permitted use. That's something that's strictly a staff assignment. When you come to, we'll just go down through the list here. Site plan review recommended by staff. So R means the body is making a recommendation or reviewing. D means the decider. And then we have up at the top, planning director, planning commission, city council, and appeal authority. So those are the folks that are involved in our land use review processes. So that's what these R's and D's are all about. So if it's a blank, then that particular body or individual's not involved in that process. So you can see that the site plan review process, planning staff reviews that, planning commission is the final decider. On lot line adjustments, that the staff would be the one to be both reviewing and deciding. The one for subdivisions, we've listed it as as just discussed by John, review and decision. Final subdivision plat would be a staff decision. So we have plat amendments or vacations. Those require city council action. So both the staff and planning commissioner are recommenders, and reviewers, and city council decides. Street or easement vacation, again, that requires a public hearing, and so the city council is a decision maker. So conditional uses and site plans, there's another opportunity. There are some places where smaller site plans are potentially something that if you felt comfortable, you could delegate that to staff to do. I don't think I'd ever recommend a conditional use approval for the staff to be the final decider. And you see business licenses, we review those. Variance appeals, we recommend, and the appeal authority, that individual makes the final decision. And then the bottom two are the examples of the legislative items. So zoning maps, text changes, and the general plan amendments are recommended by the staff and the planning commission, and with the city council being the final decision authority. So the first question is, do the planning commission, city council feel comfortable with this array? And we could talk about that in more detail. And we have what's shown on the screen, but we could also make some adjustments to that if you felt like you wanted to entertain some additional, take an additional look at those administrative reviews.
Who's our appeal authority again? I wasn't clear on that.
We have a contracted individual. Her name is Meg Ryan, and she works with the League of Cities and Towns, and we have a contract with her, so that when we have variance requests and what have you, then she conducts a public meeting and makes a decision relative to those variance requests. We have been averaging maybe 2 a year over the last 5 years.
So the process of getting a variance to begin with is difficult, as I recall, right?
Right.
Limited. It's limited.
It's sort of the way I like to characterize those is it's kind of the relief valve to the standards.
Well, it is, Rob, but let me just touch on that for a second, because state law has gotten very specific on when you can and can't do or give a variance. You have to meet not just one of 5 criteria, you have to meet them all. And so that's why giving that responsibility to one person is probably just fine, because the decision making is really not that hard. It's very specific in this state law section.
So we'd like to hear from the Planning Commission and the Council as to whether or not they're comfortable with the way this is portrayed, or if there are some other things that you'd like us to look at.
Well, I appreciate the explanation from Mr. Jansen, but it does make me uncomfortable to have one person in charge of, that the appeal authority falls back on one person. And I understand that, it just feels like it should be something that's done by committee.
The point was made that there's very specific on what needs to be met by whoever's making the decision. So it makes it so it's not quite as, well, I don't like that person, or I don't feel good this day, but they're exact specific things that have to be met when they go through those things. So I have no problems if that happens. As long as those loopholes are closed, don't have unintended results.
I feel like some of those things are quite arbitrary, though. For example, what is, I know one of them is safety, and that's, to some extent, that's in the eyes of the beholder, right? We've had some things here where I felt like, oh, that's safe enough, and somebody else has disagreed with me.
So Brandon, how about we get you that criteria, you take a look at it. It's in the chapter that we have now.
I'm actually somewhat familiar with it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
John,
that's great. I mean, and I'm only one vote here, right? It's just you asked for my opinion. That's my opinion, that having one person be an authority on anything seems a little heavy-handed, but I mean, I'm not going to die on that hill either, right? Like, and I respect your expertise in the matter.
Brandon?
Yeah.
Or John?
Yeah.
This is Councilwoman Stoker, and I was on the Board of Adjustments for at least 5 years or so. And what John has said, there are very specific criteria that they have to meet. And if they can't meet all of them, then you don't grant the variance. And it's just like a judge. He has certain rules and things that he has to apply by. And as long as they follow those criteria and deny it, then the city is safe. But if they go off of that, then the city is liable because they didn't follow those guidelines.
Unlike a judge, this is an appointed position, right? So, I mean, we get a vote on our judges.
Well, I don't know about that, but at the time of a Board of Adjustments was an appointed position.
So our appeal authority is approved by the city council, and it's done through a contract.
Well, that's a concern I have. It's not necessarily a showstopper concern, but I bring that up as a concern I have. That's what you asked for.
And I understand that, and I think that's a good concern. There are some cities that have stayed with the board kind of philosophy, but it really has changed from conversation I remember having with one of my city council members about, isn't it so great we have this Board of Adjustment that lets people do whatever they want to do? It's just not that way anymore, the way that state law changed. It's very specific what can happen. In Meg's presentations that she does, and it is interesting that she's also your appeal authority, but she calls it quasi-judicial, okay? So it is basically like a judge. And in that same vein, it's the least discretionary action within a city because of that state law. But let's get you that. Let's get you a copy of that. I'm going to write a little note.
John.
Yeah.
Councilman Swanson here. I agree with Brandon. The thought of one person in a solo, regardless of how much the legislature has tightened that up and there's specific things that they have to meet. My experience has just not been good where government is run by one person. And I'd like to see three people. I don't think we need more than that, but I think there ought to be more than one set of eyes, in my opinion.
Okay, just realize that's what you have been doing, just one person for a while. So that would be a change. We just created the chapter that reinforces that, okay? So, but that's a policy conversation everybody ought to have. If you want to go to 3 or 5 or whatever it is, just know that those kinds of decisions that they're making are really regimented. They're just not, there's no like, I just sort of like this guy or this happens to work in my mind.
My experience, John, I've been to one appeal situation and the city I was doing it with had just an individual. But the way I took it is, whether it was an administrative issue or a legislative issue, the requirements they have to live by almost convert that legislative process to an administrative one, where it really breaks it down to say, in order to grant one or deny one, it has to meet a certain criteria. And it's not really as much up to the seat of their pants or a judgment call that I feel like you tend to get when you have a group sitting around debating it. So that process enables that to really take a legislative decision and almost convert it to a regimented administrative thing. And so I felt like it was a good process that way.
Let us get you a copy of that part and take a look, see what you think. You know, it's interesting. Most communities are going that direction to the single person because of that state law. You've already gone there, but maybe you haven't talked about it enough. I don't know. You know, I just did a similar kind of effort in another community last night, and they're very much in favor of going to the appeal authority because they did have conflicts between people, and you just couldn't get the decisions very well. The other thing was, I think, was with the board, they don't meet often enough, and then people wouldn't show up when they were asked to meet up. So just an interesting observation.
And John, I think that the takeaway from this, you know, initial first question is we need more information so that this can be a decision that comes back with that additional info. So
I agree, John. If John could just get us the information, then we can readdress this issue with after doing adequate research. But good question, so thank you.
Yeah. And I'd just like to add one minor comment, which is just to provide a comment on the scale. I don't know an exact count, but we usually have maybe 1 to 4 of these appeals a year. Most of them have been about like lot issues or lot sizes. I'm not saying that they're major things can't go to the appeal authority, but they have tended to, at least numerically, be smaller issues about like lot size or what's the rear property line or issues like that. So that might provide some context as well.
I have another question about it, but I can hold that for when we get down to the guts of it.
So as far as this table and what have you, we want to get some more information to you on variances and appeals and so forth. What about the other processes? Are you comfortable with what's here? Do you want to entertain some additional administrative reviews by other folk? Maybe you all need to think about it.
Rob, this is Councilman Severing. I feel fine with that. If you're looking for an opinion, I think that what is proposed here in this rubric is fine with me. Maybe other city councilmen will jump in.
I think this is Eric. I think it's fine as well. The only thing I would suggest is, you know, that we have, you know, if it is, you know, bringing up the appeal side of things, if there's something that's probably a decision line from the planning department and it's not before either body, then if it's not, if something doesn't go the applicant's way or they feel differently about it, they do have the option to put it on a commission agenda or a council agenda, whatever's pertinent, to then discuss it beyond that point.
Yeah, we just discussed that this week, as a matter of fact, and we have what we're calling a bump up provision for a staff's decision to go to a planning commission.
So let me give you an example of I've been here just going on 7 years, and I would say 90% of the variance requests that we've had to do with reductions of setbacks on steep lots. So we had a sufficient number of those that we determined that with planning commission review and council's approval, you'll recall that we now have a reduced setback if lots are above a certain percentage slope. So the idea behind all of this is you look at specific circumstances, and if they warrant, then you end up making a change to the ordinance and the ordinance standard, as opposed to sending somebody through the variance process when you have a circumstance that actually meets all of the state code criteria.
I'll just add to that, that is a great way to do that, because you don't really want the appeal authority doing the same case over and over and over again. Doesn't make any sense. That says something's wrong with our ordinance or something needs some work. And so making those kinds of incremental changes based on the kinds of things you're seeing with an appeal authority really makes sense.
John, I appreciate your comments. I know Chairman Thomas has a big agenda, so
Okay.
we could try to move. I surely don't want to cut off any questions, but I know the Planning Commission has a lot of work to do tonight too.
So the next policy question has to do with the in the subdivision ordinance. I don't know, John Call might be able to remember when this has ever happened, but there's a provision in our subdivision ordinance that if someone is contracted to have their improvements in and what have you, and they end up defaulting, this ordinance requires that go before the city council to resolve the matter. So the question for the council is, do you still want to be involved in that process? If you do, we'll basically maybe massage the language a little bit, but we'll keep it in place. Otherwise, other options could be that it would be something that would be reviewed by the city manager, something like that. So city council, if you have an immediate thought about that, then please share that with us. If not, we'll move on to the next one. Maybe you need some time to think about it.
Rob, I think our previous discussion with Commissioner Thomas and was the fact we might set a threshold on the amount. If it was over that, it would go through a different process, but a lot of those are fairly minor.
Yeah, and that would be a good option. So I'm not hearing lots of thoughts about that one.
I think on that, council, if my opinion on that, this is Chairman Thomas, but in a subdivision, when there's a guarantee extension or that, I guess in my opinion, if a developer is asking for extension, but work is being done on the development, as long as that's reasonable, I think staff can approve those things. However, if it comes by way of, let's use the example of a developer has sold a portion of his lot and he's not doing any improvements, and the time limit comes up and he's coming in asking for an extension. If the people who bought those lots are pleading with the city to force him to get it done, then that's a situation where the city steps in and says, no, you need to get it done or we're going to call on your bond. But if it's an uncontested non-issue, I think the staff can just go ahead and grant those extensions because, typically it's usually when it's an extension like that, it's something that the development hasn't taken place and the developer still owns all the ground and it hasn't sold any lots. So they're really not putting any public at risk at that point.
This is Councilman Swanson. I agree with Eric on that one. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I like what Eric has said, and I think at some point council has to trust staff better than we do sometimes, myself especially included. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think that level of trust that gives the council to staff is simply that, having a caveat in there saying if there's a property owner other than the developer that's opposing an extension, then it goes before the council rather than staff being able to make that decision, because there may be an instance where staff is buddies with the developer or enemies, and it may cause an issue that way. But it's really the whole point of those bonds and those things are to ensure improvements get done for the public who may have bought a lot once the plat was recorded. So that's what we want to make sure we're protecting.
This is Councilman Severing, and I agree. I think that I would want to be made aware of that information. So I think it would be something that could be brought before us so we know about it. but I agree with the idea with both Councilman Swanson and Chairman Thomas that it's okay to be made by staff.
Councilman Severing, one of the things we talked about is maybe a quarterly summary of any extensions just for council's knowledge, but letting that approval take place by staff. So maybe a quarterly or semi-annual report of waivers would help with your desire.
I think that's sufficient. I'm not sure what Councilman Swanson feels, but I think a quarterly report is sufficient.
I think that would be great, especially if it's presented by the council member who is the liaison to planning and building.
I think that's great.
Or by a member of the staff, either way.
Okay, I think that gives us
Okay, moving on. Yeah.
good direction on that one. So let's move to policy question 3. And this has to do with how to address the zoning that is along Washington Boulevard. So you'll recall that we have on our general plan, we have the downtown and we have the Southtown area. We also have 4 different commercial zones. We have 2 residential zones and a manufacturing zone along Washington. So I've reported before what our thoughts were with respect to the standards and how those things should be put together. So what we're recommending is that we replace all of the C1 and C2 zones and create a community commercial zone for Washington Boulevard. And we establish a neighborhood commercial zones if there's other properties in the city that warrant a neighborhood commercial kind of situation. The second thing is that along Washington, we have a number of R4 zone properties. And I believe we only have 1 or 2 properties that are zoned R3. Whenever anyone has made any requests with respect to that type of zone and what have you, it's generally the R4 zone. Our thinking is we may want to just simplify that and eliminate the R3 zone altogether. And then let me just stop there. The other thought is that because of the varying zones that we have along Washington, in the R4 zone, we actually allow for professional offices in that zone. Our recommendation there is to eliminate the professional offices in the R4 zone. And then if we have existing professional offices, we simply rezone those to commercial. So the last one that I have, last bullet point, and probably engender some discussion, but what about those basic premises? Do you feel comfortable in that direction?
I do.
You know, there's been some discussion, I think Councilman Swanson may have initiated that with the council having continued discussion if there's really a need, if the MPC zone is really working for us. I recall that, Phil, as a potential item we need to have further discussion on.
Right. We were looking at doing that right after the first of the year.
Is Councilman Barker, is he here in attendance tonight?
Yes, I'm here.
Well, I'd like to hear Councilman Barker's thought on this one. Because don't you work with, as I remember correctly, Councilman Barker, you work with the steering committee.
Yeah.
Is this kind of an issue that the steering committee, I would think this is an issue that the steering committee has been taking into consideration recently?
It's similar. They haven't, yeah. They're trying to figure out whether the commercial zones and residential work together or where you want to have the mixed use zones. Yeah, it's similar, but me personally, I'm not seeing, and maybe it's just 'cause I'm not informed completely, but a difference between getting rid of the C1 and C2 zone and making a commercial zone just for Washington. I'd prefer just to make it commercial, and I know there's different businesses that can come and need type of C1 or C2, but I'm more of the opinion to keep it simple and don't make new zones just to make a new zone for an area, if that makes sense.
So that's exactly what we're working towards, is to have one zone along Washington. That we would have one commercial zone along there, and that the projects that are in residential zones, we would retain that zoning. And the thought was just have that be the R4 zone as opposed to R3 and R4.
So question, Rob. What about, I mean, MPC zone was mentioned, and that takes in a good chunk. Would we retain the MPC zone as well? Because I don't see that mentioned here.
So the last bullet point is, when we look at the MPC zone, it allows for a more intense density with a requirement for mixed use. The R4 zone, I think the maximum density you can get is about 10 to 12 units per acre. The MPC, you can get between 18 and 40 units per acre. And I don't want to throw those numbers out lightly, but the opportunity might just be there that for certain properties that you want to entertain as a mixed use project, and that those higher densities may be reasonable to continue to have. And then the R4 zone, like I said, I think the maximum density, if I remember right, is about 10 to 12 units per acre is all. So that's really a big decision, right? It's probably one of the biggest decisions we have on the questions for you to consider tonight. And I'm not suggesting that you have to make a decision tonight, but we probably ought to, if you have specific questions that you want us to research regarding that, then I would like to hear from both bodies so that we can get that information back to you so you can make a decision.
Rob, this is Councilman Swanson. Go ahead, whoever that was.
Eric. I was just going to say, if the council is going to discuss the MPCs on the first of the year, then maybe this section, they have their discussion with that and their desires for that. And then, because that's going to greatly impact kind of a lot of what this is as well. So maybe this gets decided along with that or whatever.
That would be a reasonable way to approach it. The outline of those bullet points are the ones that we are pursuing at this point, let's put it that way. And then with the idea that some of these things like MPC, R4 densities, and those kinds of things will be forthcoming to have a final decision on those.
Well, Rob, Councilman Severing, I would say let's hold on policy question number 3 until after the first of the year, where the MPC zone has been discussed by the city council.
So that would be an answer to the item number 4. Any questions, other things to be addressed? Bring us to the end, right, Rob?
Yes. Basically, you want to know if there are other specific provisions that you're interested in having us pursue.
Rob, Councilman Swanson here.
Yes.
One of the thoughts that I've had that really has its genesis in some comments that I've had from individuals who are doing some small developments, and by that I mean like infill. Can we also take a look at, and maybe this isn't the appropriate time, but take a look at our infill and how we handle infill, where you know, there might be an acre or two that's being developed versus an entire subdivision.
There are some cities that actually have infill ordinances.
I understand we have somebody that works for us that helped one of our neighboring cities write their infill ordinance. Do you know anybody like that, Rob?
I might. That's one thing that we haven't included in the ordinance. And that if you wanted us to consider that and possibly add some provisions for infill, we could certainly look at that.
I'd like that. I don't know how the rest of council and commission feels.
I would agree. I think it would be valuable to have something addressing specifically those small little areas, as long as it doesn't create the thing that we've tried to avoid when we eliminated flag lots and things like that.
Right.
You know, where people are putting houses behind houses because they're on 1 acre in downtown area. But as long as we're not creating opportunities for things like that, but good quality, true infill development, I think that would be a valuable thing to have.
I think we need something better than we have now.
So in every meeting I've ever attended where you've asked for ideas, at least since I came up with this idea, I've suggested I want to see the parking ordinance altered to contain an offset for the ratio that the overall parking slots can be reduced with a load unload zone in a parking lot. I feel like that's something that will benefit us down the road as ride share increases, as the future of transportation increases. That we're going to need places for people that don't own cars to be dropped off, and I'd love to see an offset and something in our parking ordinance changed for that.
Okay, we'll add that to the list. That's all we have as a staff. I don't know if John Jansen, if you have anything else that you'd like to wrap up with, but.
No, that was it. I think we got through our agenda. Again, if you look at the section by section list and you got any questions about any of that, just send us an email and we'll get them answered. And I think tomorrow you're gonna see a copy of the Appeal Authority chapter. So, okay.
All right, thank you, John.
Yeah.
Council or commission, is there anything else to discuss as this particular body?
Just want to say thanks to the commission for all the good hard work that you all do. It's great to have a body that you can trust.
I would echo.
You guys have a thing.
We must not be doing something right then.
What's that?
I said we must not be doing something right then. If you trust us too much, we gotta throw a few more O'Reillys or something in the mix or something.
Well, I think if you had an O'Reilly's quick quack car wash combo, I think that would hit the ticket.
Yeah, and an oil change with it. That will be.
Yeah.
And a drive-through restaurant with some coffee, we'd be all set.
Yeah.
I'd echo Councilman Swanson's comments and just appreciate all you guys do and wish you the happiest of holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, I entertain a motion of adjournment for the work session.
Hope we adjourn the work session. Commissioner Mason.
Second, Councilman Swanson.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn our joint meeting with Planning Commission and City Council. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you, council. We'll excuse you at this time. You're welcome to stay with our meeting, but you put a lot of time in the city, and so we'll excuse you for this time if you'd like to leave the meeting. We'll move on to our regular meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, while they sign off, I propose like a 1-minute break just to for my own
Thank you,
needs.
Richard.
How about that?
All right, thank you. We'll pause for 60 seconds before we begin the next item.
No, the commission's just starting now. They started late.
Hey, Lynn, this is Ryan.
Okay, now I'm here.
Hey, I was going to stay on and listen. I don't know if you want to unpromote me to the lobby or whatever it's called, but I don't need to stay as a panelist. I don't know the easiest way if you want me just to log off and log back in.
Let's see. Whatever you'd like to do. I don't see where I can move you to attendee. So you're welcome to stay with us.
All right, I'm not going to make any comments.
Okay.
Unless we really derail this thing, huh?
Yeah. Well, no, then I'll watch it.
Do we have everybody back with us?
I'm back.
All right.
All right. Looks
Well, we're all back. Let's go ahead and continue our meeting with our regular meeting. We'll just make note that all planning commissioners in attendance tonight. Item number 4 is meeting consideration for the minutes of December 2nd, planning commission meeting minutes. Any discussion or corrections that need to happen on those minutes?
I move we approve them, Commissioner Mason.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the December 2nd, 2020 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. I'll go on to our opening meeting statement. For those of you in attendance, we addressed a little bit before, but for our joint meeting, but before opening meeting statement, before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the city staff report, the item will be open for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, e.g. pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be forwarded to the commission. Speakers are required to have registered their full name on Zoom and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address all comments to the Planning Commission. And please mute your microphone until ready to speak. All right, do we have any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest with commissioners tonight on the agenda?
I think I might.
You think you might? Somebody gave me a $100 bill.
Well, I think I am going to recuse myself on this one. White Rock subdivision, though I don't have a conflict with the developer directly with Alan. The primary, at least to this point in time, contractor who's been building the houses and done a lot of the work there, I have an agreement with him to build a house for me. And I just feel more comfortable if I weren't associated with it.
Okay. He's building it for you for free if you vote, give him approval. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Or you want to just stay away and pay?
Yeah, I'll just listen in. But yeah, where this other development company is building most of the houses on this property, it could be construed to be a conflict.
Okay.
Where he's doing work for me as well.
Anything else, commissioners?
You know, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was one of the emails that was sent in by one of the, I guess, neighboring property owners to, was it the Coldwater? I can't see that far down on the agenda on my screen, but it was the Coldwater, I think item number 10. The last comment they had was part of the application was by a family with the last name of Barker, and they specifically asked if Commissioner Barker was related to them, and if so, he should recuse himself. I don't think that should be the case. I just wanted to point that out, that was specifically a request in one of those emails.
I read that. I read that. I had to kind of smile because yes, Lyman and I are related.
Mm-hmm.
The decision doesn't affect me any one way or another, financial, anything whatsoever, family wise. But just to make the guy more comfortable and not to be backbiting behind your back because, oh, well, Barker did this, Barker said that. I'll just listen. And that way it won't be any conflicts going on, perceived or unperceived or not. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does. And just so the public knows, you know, ex parte communications are conflicts of interest with the commissioner in order to recuse themselves or have an issue. It really, by law, it's really disclosed if somebody has a position to gain or, you know, money or things like that in the situation. If you know somebody, your friends, or you live close, that technically doesn't qualify for a conflict, just so those know. But oftentimes, like this situation, just to stay even more transparent and above board, we tend to do those things if we follow our interest. Does that pretty much sum it up, John? Are you still with us?
Yeah, so it's there. Typically, the state code says if there's a financial interest, then the state requires you to. And other than that, it's up to the individual commissioner or council member.
Like, so I'm just doing this because that way the person who wrote that can feel more comfortable with the decision.
Yeah, I didn't think there would be any conflict of interest, but I wanted to make sure that we pointed out that somebody did have a concern in their email and had specifically asked that.
I kind of had to chuckle a little bit.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's great to do. So we will move on. Any public comments for items that are not on the agenda? If those in attendance would like to address something that's not on the agenda, please do so at this time.
Or can I add, Commissioner, for Chairman, any comments about the discussion we just had, since we didn't ask for public comment then?
Yeah.
Eric, I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. As part of that, I guess I probably should invite it on the consent agenda. Normally, if something's on the consent agenda, it's not an item for discussion. It's essentially where staff is, it checks all the boxes and we can just vote on it without discussion. But so maybe at this time we'll move on to the consent agenda. Subdivision ordinance 2020-19, the consideration and action regarding the preliminary approval of the White Rock subdivision phase 2, the 18 lots located at 1401 East, 3100 North. I guess really kind of looking at the way we're trying to do our new land code, Rob, is this would really kind of be under a administrative item, then becoming after this point. Is that correct?
Yes, it is an administrative item. And you'll recall that the reason that this particular phase did not get preliminary approval was the detention basin was being designed to allow for these lots to become, if you will, in a safe zone. So that's the reason why this was delayed.
And it's on the consent agenda because the council or the commission had seen and approved the general plat for both phases prior. So it's just a technical tick of the box, so to speak.
Okay. Well, that being said, I kind of thought that, and since we have a long item and everybody's been with us long, what I would like to do is simply, since I didn't include this in the comments for public, if there's any public who'd like to comment on this, I'll open it up for that. And then if that spurs a discussion with commission, we will. Otherwise, we can just vote on it. So at this time, if you would like to comment on the White Rock subdivision, please raise your hand and I'll type something in the chat and then we'll unmute you.
I don't see any hands, Eric.
All right, well, I entertain a motion for our consent agenda.
Do I have to do them all? I move we approve the consent agenda.
Yeah, there's only one item, so.
Well, I've done the last two motions, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Is that Commissioner Nancaro?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Waite. He must be muted. Commissioner Mason.
I'm gonna abstain from this one.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So thank you. We will move on to our administrative items. Item number 9, subdivision ordinance 2020-16. Consideration and action regarding the preliminary approval of Majors Mini Farm subdivision located at approximately 100 West, 3050 North. Presenters Brandon Bell. Brandon?
Good evening, Chair and members of the commission. I just want to give you some details about this subdivision. It's Majors Mini Farm subdivision. It's at approximately 100 West and 3050 North. The project area is about 1.52 acres. And this is an administrative application. The zoning district for the property is R110. And Lynn, are you able to pull up the plat? I believe it's exhibit B or C. That would be helpful. Try and get that right out. Thanks. And then if you could scroll down and yeah, there we are. And then maybe just zoom in on the lots if that's okay. Anyway, I'll let you work on that while I move on. So it's an R110 zone, which requires a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet on interior lots and 11,000 square foot on corner lots, with a lot width requirement of 100 feet at the 100-foot setback. This subdivision has actually a hammerhead design, you'll notice, that's being incorporated into the subdivision and has been reviewed and approved by the city engineer and the fire marshal. That's and that is something that's a technique that's available as part of our public works standards. We have received a geotechnical report and a will serve letter for secondary water, and for also a will serve letter for Central Weaver sewer. There are a number of technical details that need to be addressed. The existing home on lot 4, which is the southern lot. I don't know if I have the ability to annotate or not. Lynn, do you know?
Yeah, you should.
I'm not finding, well, okay, here we go. Lot 4 is this lot right here, and there's an existing home there. That the design of the hammerhead or the location of it either needs to be adjusted, or they need to look at maybe pulling down the awning that's on the north side of the home in order to meet the front setback. The way that the hammerhead design works, it makes it such that all areas where the property on lots intersect with the right of way, which includes the hammerhead, you need to be 30 feet back. By our definition, it's a front property line. And so there needs to be some sort of an adjustment there with regards to the location of the hammerhead or the awning. Next, in the report it states lot 3, and that's a typo. It actually is lot 2. That is the lot just to the north of the lot we just talked about. I'll circle that in red. This lot right here, there also needs to because of the issue that I talked about our definition of front lot line, any home that's constructed on that property line will need to be 30 feet from all of the property lines that separate the lot from the street. All of the lots in this proposed subdivision do meet the square footage requirement for the lots. However, on another technical note, the version of the plat that we have that's being shown tonight does have some what are called buildable envelope lines, which basically show the setbacks. This is an item where consideration for approval of the subdivision is being considered and not building permit. And so as a result of that, setbacks are applied at the time of building permit and the time of the submittal of that application, and not at subdivision. And as a result of that, staff recommends as a condition of approval that the buildable area envelope lines that show those setbacks be removed from the plat. I've listed prior to recording, but we'd actually prefer that it be prior to the next version of the plat that's submitted and considered for final approval. And then I've spoken with the applicant this afternoon. There's a small accessory building at the rear of the lot line, and that accessory building needs to be verified to meet setback requirements for like the rear property line needs to be adjusted so that the existing building meets the rear setback requirements once the lot is actually subdivided, so that the accessory building is not too close to the setback line. It's hard to see, but there's an accessory building right in this area, so whatever the extents of that building are, it will need to, the property line will need to be adjusted to make sure it meets the setbacks. The applicant stated that they've done that. We'll just need to speak with them and make sure that they're using the right setbacks and stuff for the size and height of the building. And then finally, back on lot 2 lot 4, where the blue line is at, that is they're attempting to pull property from an existing subdivision, and there's nothing prohibiting that, but it needs to go through the appropriate process. And what that means is that the applicant needs to amend the subdivision that property is already in, or a portion of that proposed lot is already in, which is the North Country Road subdivision. Staff recommends this as a condition of approval for this subdivision, and that the applicant work with the staff and Weber County to determine the best way to amend that existing plat. We actually have almost an identical situation on the next subdivision, so that issue will come up again. Those are, that's a pretty good summary of what the issues that have come up as staff has reviewed this. The considerations that the Planning Commission might want to address, or does the subdivision meet the requirements of the applicable city subdivision and zoning ordinances? And is the proposed subdivision consistent with the general plan? The general plan does call for this property to be developed as low density residential. And the proposed subdivision meets the requirements of the applicable North Ogden City ordinances and conforms to the North Ogden City general plan with the recommended conditions of approval noted below and in this report. So I've stated the recommended conditions of approval, some of them in my prior comments, but I'm just going to go through them real quick. The recommended conditions of approval are requirements of the North Ogden City engineers report, the requirements of the technical review committee letter, a note be placed on the plat referencing the company report number and date of the geotechnical report. The applicant stated that one's already done. The applicant verify that the home on lot 4 meets the front setback requirements, or adjust the location of the hammerhead or the awning on the home to meet that setback requirement. Sorry, I just got my windows on my computer. Give me 1 second. The next recommended condition is that any adjusted lot configurations will need to meet the minimum square footage requirements, since there will need to be probably some minor adjustments to these lots potentially. And then this next one, it says, again, this is where I had a typo. It says lot 3 should actually be lot 2. If you you're welcome to note that I'd appreciate it if you'd note that in any motion that is made, if you choose to approve it. There are I should note that there are some exceptions to the 30-foot property line, but that setback for things like porches and things like that, you might want to note that as well. The next recommended condition is that all setback lines and buildable area lines be removed from the plat, as the applicant is requesting subdivision for lots, not a building permit, and those setbacks are applied at the time of building permit. And then on a related note, the existing accessory building will need to be verified to meet the setback requirements on the rear property line of lot 2, or the lot line will need to be adjusted to meet those setbacks. And then the applicant needs to amend the North Country Road subdivision as a condition of approval, and work with staff in Weber County to find the best way to do that. I think that covers all my comments. Try to move fairly quickly through them. What questions might you have for me that I can help you with?
Thanks, Brandon. One question I have is on that lot 4, you're saying in there, referring to 30 feet. Can we not consider that part of the hammerhead to be the side yard? So it would only require a 20-foot setback on a corner lot. I know that brings into another issue that a corner lot would then have to be bigger than 10,000 feet, but seems odd that we're saying that the front has to be 30 feet and the side has to be 30 feet. Is that,
We've looked at the definitions a number of times, both myself, John, and Rob, based on our definition of front lot line. Any lot line that the interpretation is that that the hammerhead is a variation of a cul-de-sac because it's not a through street, and so that was the first determination that it's not considered a corner lot because it's not a through street. And then the next question was, okay, so where's the front property line in order to determine that? And our definition of front property line states that I don't know the exact verbiage, but it basically says any property line that comes in contact with the edge of the street right-of-way, the street right-of-way property line. And based on those two standards in our code, any concept that any property line that touches it is considered part of the front property line. Similar to how in a cul-de-sac, the front property line, may curve quite a bit, and it's all considered the front property line. So there's advantages and disadvantages to a hammerhead design, but according to our definitions, this is the only interpretation that staff has felt comfortable with.
okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
You bet. Any other questions I can help with?
Commissioners, anything else?
Commissioner Thomas, I have discussion to that matter, but there's no other questions.
Okay. Well, if we have no other questions for Brandon, we'll excuse him and invite the applicant up. Is the applicant with us tonight, Lynn?
Yes.
If they would like to address this, that's not a requirement.
This is Avenue Consultants, I believe, Greg Wall. Go ahead.
Okay.
All right, I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Very good. Lynn, would you mind bringing up that PDF that I emailed you earlier?
Yes.
Great. And is there a way that I can control it, or you can see my mouse?
If you want to bring it up, you can share it.
Oh, just bring up the PDF and then share.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I don't see an option on the Zoom for me to share. If you can bring it up, I'll just tell you when to go to the next page, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, let me get it back up.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. So, and if you can change it so that the extent is just one page, so we can see a full page at a time. That's great. So the owner of this property is Jenny Taylor, and when she and her husband Brent purchased the home, there was a large area in the backyard that Brent was excited about using for a garden. He thought it would be a good way to teach his kids to be responsible and spend time together. And so because of that, Jenny wanted to call it the Majors Mini Farm Subdivision. That's where it's got its name. And if you go to the next page, Lynn. And so there's a local organization, a nonprofit called Have a Heart Home, who's working with Nielsen Homes to build Jenny and her family a new home in what is now the vacant backyard of her existing home. If you go to the next page. I work for a company called Avenue Consultants. We're an engineering and land development consulting firm. And our engineers have worked with North Ogden City. We actually designed the new intersection of Washington Boulevard and 2600 North. And I understand they're going to start construction on that in the spring. My name is Greg Wall. My background, I have a master's degree in real estate development, and half of the classes were from the College of Architecture and Urban Planning. So I have a graduate certificate in urban planning. And I'm also a planning commissioner like you are. I am on the planning commission in Farmington, where I live. But I'm glad for the opportunity to help Jenny get the plat arranged and the entitlements to build her new home. You can go to the next page. I wanted to say thank you to the city staff. This was a lot trickier than it seems like it would be for just an acre and a half. But we ran into several problems, but the staff was great about helping us come up with solutions to those. So we appreciate that. If you can go to the next page. This is an aerial photo of the property, and the yellow outline is the property boundary of where Jenny lives now. And you can see that 100 West comes up and kind of dead ends into the backyard of the property. The original plan many years ago was to have 100 West go through all the way to 3100 North. But in 2014, the city council voted to have it not go through to preserve 100 West as a dead end street. And we originally were planning to do a cul-de-sac in this area. And the city has engineering standards with dimensions and everything for the cul-de-sac. And when we laid that out on the site, it took up so much of the room in the middle that it only kind of left some wedge-shaped triangular pieces in the corners that weren't really large enough to build a home on. And so one of the council members in the prior meeting brought up an infill ordinance, and something like that would have been helpful in this situation. But we didn't have that option. And if you go to the next page, Lynn, I noticed on the design standards for the cul-de-sac, there were some notes. And if you go to the next page, it's got those notes zoomed in. In that note 1, it says that the circular cul-de-sac design is considered as the city's standard design, but there are other alternate designs that can be considered as approved by the city engineer. And whenever we consider an alternate design for a turnaround at the end of a dead-end street, our main concern is being able to have a fire truck turn around. And so if you go to the next page, Lynn, this is a page from the International Fire Code, and they have standard designs for fire trucks to be able to turn around. The circular cul-de-sac is one of them, and we knew that that wouldn't work well. There's a wide design in the middle on the top that isn't very common, but the hammerhead design in the lower left looked promising. The one in the lower right is the one that we ended up using. It's just the same one rotated 90 degrees. But the hammerhead design doesn't take up as much of the land as a cul-de-sac does. And it's very helpful in situations where the slope doesn't allow for a cul-de-sac. That wasn't the case on Jenny's property. But since it wasn't very large, it was an infill development, we felt like the hammerhead design would work really well. So if you go to the next page, we ran that by Lauren Gardner, and he was good with the engineering design. He wanted to get input from the planning commission, but we also talked to Councilman Barker, the fire marshal, and he confirmed that the design that we came up with for the Majors Mini Farm subdivision is in compliance with the International Fire Code. So if you go to the next page, this is the plat that we were looking at. And on the second page, I shaded that hammerhead design. One of the things that Rob Scott asked us to do was to design it so that a car could still parallel park along the road around the outside and still preserve the space for the fire truck to turn around. So that's what we did. And I know I took a little bit of time explaining the reasoning, but if you look at the property line compared to the two tails of the hammerhead, you can see that the hammerhead takes up a lot less space than the cul-de-sac would have. And it allows for there to be enough room for Jenny and her family to build her new home. And so we feel like that's a really good solution to the plat and for access to the lot for it to be usable, but also to allow snowplows and garbage trucks and in the event of a fire truck to be able to turn around. And some of the kind of technical issues that Brandon brought up, we're happy to address all those. In order for there to be 30 feet from the home at the southwest in lot 4, we need to shift the hammerhead about 3.2 feet northward from where it is now, and that's no problem. We'll do that. There's a shed at the northwest corner, and I looked up the standards in 11.7B4 on the setbacks, and we've redrawn the line there on the property line between lot 1 and lot 2. And both lots still meet the dimensional standards for frontage and for area. And some of the other technical ones, the geotech engineer, we put that stamp on the first page with the contact information and everything. So there's nothing technically that would prohibit this from going forward to final plat. And we're happy to address those items. With the surveyor question, if you can scroll up just a little bit to the title, Lynn, I called the county recorder, and you can see under the Majors Mini Farm subdivision, it says also amending lot 8 of the North Country Road subdivision. The county recorder was good with that, but Brandon thought it would be wise to check with the county surveyor as well. And so we've tried a couple times to get in touch with him, but we will get in touch with them. And if we need to redraw the North Country Road subdivision showing it excluding lot 8, we will do that. So that's to present, and I appreciate your time, and happy to answer any questions, but would appreciate your vote in favor of the Majors Mini Farm division.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, is there any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, so how do you feel about the conditions laid out by the staff? I mean, you addressed most of those, but I didn't hear anything that you objected to.
No, we can and will address all of those. Like I said, the 30-foot setback to the home on the southwest, I actually already redrew it with the 3.2 feet to the north, and everything still works out the way we would like it to.
I guess the question would be more, are you on a vote of approval of moving from preliminary, would you be willing to accept, typically when we approve these with a staff report like this, an approval with conditions that the things in the staff report are met, and you don't have to present to them everything to us that it's been met, but just simply, if you agree with that and don't oppose any of that, then typically we would approve it based on those conditions, and then you and staff can work those items out.
Okay. Yeah, I read through the staff report earlier, and so the note on the geotechnical report is already there on the first page, just to the left of the map that shows the vicinity. We'll make sure lot 4 meets the setbacks. With the setback change, it might affect the square footage of lot 4, but we'll make sure that it maintains the minimum of 10,000 feet that it needs. Lot 3, that lot is not planned to be built on now, but it will be able to be built on for the future. But yeah, we had planned on the frontage being 30 feet, which is the front setback for the R110 zone. We'll remove the envelope lines, the buildable envelope lines from the plat. We actually made those kind of with the misunderstanding. It ended up being that there would be 1 front yard, 1 rear yard, and 2 side yards. The way it works out, there's 2 front yards and 2 side yards. So we had to rearrange where the home would go on the lot, but we think we've got that figured out. So the accessory building, we'll redraw the line there around that to make sure that it meets the setbacks, and work with the surveyor to get the road subdivision amendment completed. So yeah, that's fine.
Okay, well, thank you.
So one clarification, just really quick. Again, I tried to note this in my report, but the note that says lot 3, actually the recommended condition of approval is intended to apply to lot 2. That was where there was more of an issue. That
yeah, and so, sorry about that. Lot 2 will also meet the 30-foot setback as well.
So I had a quick question, and for lot 3, does it meet the frontage requirement for it to have a house built eventually?
It does. The way that we measured it was from the south property line to the north property line and labeled it. And I think it was a little over 100 feet, and the requirement in the R1 is 90 feet. And Brandon can confirm that.
So the requirement, as far as staff is aware, is just simply that it connects to the right of way. And then, so that's the requirement for frontage, which is separate from the lot width requirement, which is that the lot be 100 feet wide at the 30-foot setback. And so, in this case, it actually does, just because the way the lot's arranged and what's defined as being the front property line is where it connects with the street. So it actually does meet that requirement.
And one other item with that, another of the engineering requirements is that the driveway be at least 5 feet off the property line, and we made sure that it is. So.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners?
I just had one question. This is Commissioner Nancaro. On this hammerhead design, I know that this currently is sort of a dead-end street, but there's a big field there. So with this hammerhead design, when they do snow removal and the snow plow piles it up there, has there been any consideration to where, I mean, it looks like it would be right in their driveways on both sides of that hammerhead. Is there a
Lynn, can you
kind of a
zoom
plan?
into the top of the hammerhead right there? So in the standard cul-de-sac design, there's a requirement for a 40-foot by 5-foot snow storage area. And it's a small label. It's kind of hard to see, but to the north.
Oh, I do see it, yeah.
It says 40-foot snow storage area. So that was one of the requirements that Lauren asked us to provide.
Okay.
And as the snow plows plow the snow northward, they'll be able to store it in that snow storage area. And the driveways to lots 2 and 3 will come off the east and west side of the road. So that snow storage area, when there's snow piled there in the wintertime, won't be blocking access to a driveway to a home.
And how about the little area on the hammerhead that's sticking out to the west? Does that go right into the driveway of lot 4?
No, so lot 4 is an existing home and the garage is on the south side. So the driveway is on the south side of lot 4.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Commissioner Mason, you were about to make a comment as well, or a question?
Well, no, I just want to know if the public had any comment on it, was one question. My other comment that I said I was going to talk about doesn't sound like it's an issue, but I'm willing to defend the fact that that is a side yard setback, like you said, Commissioner Thomas. You know, I would champion that all day long, because I think the purpose of those setbacks is to create distance between the homes, and this road provides that distance. So I would be more than comfortable with that, but I understand staff's interpretation. It doesn't sound like it's a sticky point, but
Yeah, if it was a big issue that needed to move far, then I think we could really chase that down further. But it sounds like if it only needs to move 3 feet, that's not a big deal for them. So we can just make that comply. Okay.
Just a quick comment. I think long-term with your infill ordinance, that would be a good idea to address, because in this situation it worked, but the kind of the idea behind a hammerhead is to be able to make a home fit in an area that's smaller. And the lots here are 15,000 acres or 15,000 square feet and 28,000 square feet, where the requirement's only 10. And it would be wise long-term to address that side yard, because I could see how it could be a problem.
All right, appreciate that comment. All right, well, at this time, then we would like to invite the public. If there's any public who'd like to comment on this, please raise your hand or type a chat. And
first, we have Aaron Christensen. Go ahead, Aaron, if you'd please state your address.
This is Aaron Christensen, 2428 Barker Parkway. I've got a couple questions for you, if you'd please address them. First of all, with the snow removal, I'm looking at that. I see where they're putting the snow up at the top, but I see a snow plow pushing up against that, having to back into the hammerhead to turn around. And I see that's some issue that you don't have snow. I think you're going to complicate things. With the hammerhead, we have a lot of properties in North Ogden right now that might jump on this if we open this up to having this as a new standard. So I would just caution again about that. I think I had a question. It looked like these were bordering on flag lots, but I think you've addressed that. My last question for you is I've seen nothing about requesting a variance for being longer than 600 feet. The city has had this temporary turnaround up there. Past owners of this property have looked at developing it, and council's addressed anywhere between 650 to 750 feet. My understanding from reading past notes is that where this has been a dead-end quiet street, that the other residents on the street would like to keep it that way. So I think that they're very much in favor of that, and I would support that. But I think there still needs to be an application brought up there that needs to be applied for the variance, because you are beyond 600 feet, and that needs to be addressed. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, if I may address that, I think the 600 feet is an excellent question, but didn't we change that to 750 feet in the last year and a half or so? I remember an application by Dr. Mackley that, didn't we adjust that? Maybe, does staff recall that? There was an application put in maybe 18 months ago to adjust that, because I think that's an excellent question.
I can't remember if we adjusted it at that length or we just did it because that's such a had to do with property.
But either way, we need a measurement on this, right? And probably to address that, because that would be extending.
John, what?
So
I think it's really brought up more as a question is if this was passed in 2014 by City Council to be a dead end road, at that point that would be construed as granting that length variance, if I'm not misunderstanding. But if it's 750 feet, we're okay anyway. But John,
I thought we changed it to 750 feet based on an application I remember from Mr. Mackley down around 1700 North somewhere. I drove by that property many times, and he put in an application to extend that, and he had an outside consultant that argued that our length was arbitrary. Does this ring a bell to anyone?
Yeah, it does. I think we, in fact, Ryan Barker, or was it some Flint guy who was the engineer on it. Anyway, International Fire Code says 750, if I remember right.
So
and that's kind of what we went to. We kind of looked at in that application. I don't know that it was, any ordinances were changed, but in that application, 750 feet, I think we approved it because it did meet the International Fire Code.
Yeah, I think we did. I just don't know if it carried on and became law.
So I don't remember. I can answer your question. Remember, we created a new provision that in the subdivision ordinance for special exceptions that under certain circumstances you could extend the standard cul-de-sac length. And that's what took place with the Mackley subdivision. In this case, what we're dealing with is an existing, if you will, a non-conforming situation. And so in essence, what we're doing is we're making an improvement to what is an existing stub. And that's the way we've looked at it.
And I agree with that. The last point I wanted to make, and then I'll be quiet, is that it's not under review for us tonight, I don't believe, whether or not a hammerhead design should exist. And that's very debatable. Should it not? I see the point with snow and I get all that. But the fact, and my interpretation is that it is it is a statute and the applicant's taking advantage of an existing statute. So I see no reason to deny it based on on whether it's a good idea or not, because it's conforming.
Yeah, they're already allowed in our city. This is not, asking for them to be allowed. So
now should we look at that? Probably, but based on the fact that it's allowed, the applicant's put in a reasonable request, I feel.
yeah,
But I think those are good points.
hold on for
Watching those things, because I missed the 700 or the 650 feet altogether. I wasn't even thinking that.
let's continue for public comment right now and keep our discussion till when that's over.
Thank
So
you.
we're gonna drag our on forever.
And next to talk is Jenny Taylor. Jenny, would you please give your address?
Yeah, my address is 123 West, 3100 North Ogden, Utah. I am the property owner of all 4 parcels on this land. I've owned it since the year 2014. As has been stated, I've kind of inherited this non-conforming lot, and I've spent the better part of the last 2 years and countless hours of a professional civil engineer trying to conform to every regulation you have on the books, to the extent that I've even purchased the home to the south of my land in order to be able to use some of the excess land in lot 4, what is currently above the 10,000 required square feet, in order to put in the turnaround as a hammerhead, because every way we tried to use a cul-de-sac, which I know to be the preferred method, did not fit, allowing me to put any kind of home short of something shaped like a rainbow. I don't know many builders who build homes in an arc shaped like that. I now own over 1.5 acres. It's about 1.75 acres that I own. Currently on that entire property, there are 2 homes. I am in a zone that requires 1/4 acre lots, which means I definitely have room for more than 2 homes. And I've also tried for the past 2 years to do everything I can to avoid asking for any type of variance. I don't like asking for special permission. I don't want to be treated differently. I don't want to be able to have to say I need a variance in order to use my land. The reason that we've made this work to the degree that it does work today is because we've gone through over 24 possible layouts of where we could put a home on this land that I own. When we first submitted it to the city right before Thanksgiving in order to get onto the Planning Commission, that was more than a year after our first sit-down meeting with members of the city staff and department heads, including Public Works Director, including the engineer, including the different people who might have something to say from the Planning Commission as to what we can and can't do, because this is such a unique property. Now, if I were John Hanson and had 30 acres of land that I were dividing into pieces, you could tell me I need to do this and do that, and I could move all the lines because I'm starting with a clean slate. The point is here, I'm not. I can't move my neighbors' homes. I did buy one of them. I would have bought the lot across the way, which is vacant, had the property owner been willing to sell it to me. But I have no right to eminent domain to say, sell me that so I can fit a cul-de-sac, which I know to be the city's preferred method. And so as we've gone through this, when we submitted it to the city prior to Thanksgiving, we were told that the property had 2 front yards and 2 rear yards. Now, I've never seen a house with 2 front yards, and I've certainly never seen a house with 2 rear yards. But rather than argue with that, and rather than say that sounds absurd, we went with what it is. We understand that the writing is what it is. The rules are what they are, and I am definitely a rule follower. And so the civil engineer and I went back to work in finding a way to comply even with the definitions as currently on the books. So I understand this is very unique. I know you don't want hammerheads everywhere. I know you don't want snow plowed on the road. I don't particularly mind a cul-de-sac. It would have been a lovely way to use my land. It doesn't fit in the land that I already own. And short of buying every house around me and bulldozing them all, I kind of have to use what I've been given with the laws and statutes that do exist on the property as they stand now in this zone. And so if there are opinions or recommendations from the Planning Commission, I promise you we are more than open to receiving all of those and to conforming with all of those. But that said, I do think the city of North Ogden needs to look at some infill provisions, because I assure you mine is not the only property on which 1 home currently exists. that is large enough to be divided into more homes without large enough to be divided into several homes with an entire road. We all know there's a housing shortage in Utah. We all know there's a lot of people in North Ogden that like it here enough to stay here generation after generation. And lots like mine are going to be developed, or at least applied to be developed in the future. And I would love to be able to see a way, if any of you see a better way for me to use this land, I would love to be able to build a home on the back lot of the property I've owned for the past 6 years. And I would love to be able to do so while being fully compliant with city regulations. We've gone to great extent to try to make this work. And at this point, I kind of want to say, okay, get out your Sharpie and tell me where to put the house, tell me where to put the line, and we'll do it. I don't know what else I can do. I can't shorten the length of the road that it exists. I can't, again, move any houses. I guess I could bulldoze a house, but that seems hardly practical or necessary. And so we're just trying to find a way to use this land to build a home on land that once again is already owned. I'm going to take a pile of weeds that's taxed at a very low rate and improve it with a very nice home that will increase that property tax rate, to say nothing of what my neighbors would think of having not the pile of weeds out their window and have the improvements in the land taken care of with a home, a single family home in this area. So I apologize for the passion with this. I will admit I would love for one of you to say, here's how you should use this land. I promise you we want to be compliant. It has been rather frustrating to go back to the drawing board dozens of times. I feel like we've been quite patient. Brandon has been great to work with. Rob has been great to work with. Lauren has been great to work with. Dave at Public Works has been great to work with. And we've worked with all of them. And yet still we're coming up with something that we felt like we finally eliminated any possible problems or issues, and yet there's problems and issues still being arisen. So I'd love to know the best way. Is there a possible way for me to use this over 1.5 acres I have for more than just the homes that exist on it? What's the best way to be compliant with that? If it is that I need to apply for a variance, I will do that. I was trying to avoid that. I think with many of you knowing who I am and my connection to city politics, I'd rather not be asking for any type of variation on land use. I'd rather just do what I can do as a regular North Ogden citizen. I've lived here since 1991, aside from a few years when I left for college and early marriage. So again, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're considering. And I'm simply trying to build a house on the back lot that I own. I don't know the best way to do it, but I'm definitely willing to consider any options that maybe you can see that the professional civil engineer and I have not yet been able to see. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Mike Ostermiller. Mike, go ahead and give us your address.
Thank you. Mike Ostermiller. I'm the CEO for the Northern Wasatch Association of Realtors, who owns and operates the Have a Heart 501c3 Foundation. We're located at 5703 South 1475 East in South Ogden. Just for sake of time, let me just briefly say that obviously we're supportive of this project. Have a Heart has been building homes in the northern Utah area for over 21 years now. We've built over 35 homes. We partner with local communities, the Home Builders Association, and reputable licensed home builders to build these. And so we've become pretty good at it and really sophisticated at it. And we would love for this to be our next project. And so just for the sake of time, let me just voice my support for the project and ask you to please consider approving it. And then I'm happy, I just wanted to let you introduce myself and let you know I'm happy to answer any questions about Have a Heart, since Mr. Wall mentioned it earlier, either now during the meeting or anytime after the meeting as well. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other discussion or continued discussion on this item?
Excuse me, Eric, and another hand just went up. It's Aaron Christensen again. Do you want to let him speak a second time?
Keeps it brief.
It's Aaron again. In case my concerns were taken the wrong way, in my suggestion about the variance application for the 600 beyond that, I see what Rob is saying, but if you look at the notes from last time, what they were just saying was there wasn't a final approval on anything, and even if it was given a final approval to not go through, it was a temporary turnaround. I think it should be applied for, but I think it should be approved by the city council because it fits. And I think what Mrs. Taylor's trying to do is the appropriate thing there. I was just simply suggesting that if you're going to approve this for something longer than 600 feet, you should dot all the I's and cross the T's, because other people are going to come to you and apply for the same type of thing. And it will show that you're being consistent. Again, I think it should be a variance that is approved, but I think it should be applied for.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, discussion? Rob, it sounds like, I guess in that length or whatever, when we created that ordinance, right? In the event that, I guess what we classify as special circumstances, that cul-de-sac length can be extended. That has been an approved ordinance on our books, correct?
It is.
So therefore, as the one comment was made, there wouldn't be the requirement of an ordinance. That does fall into that on the books to classify as a circumstance, which the extension would be allowed from the 650 to 750. So sounds like that's been, as staff addressed properly at the beginning and done.
I'll be happy to review it again with our city attorney, make a determination on this.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, we do want to make sure that we're consistent in following everything as we just went through the beginning of the meeting. You know, that this is an administrative item for approval, and we don't get to make judgment calls. If it's on the books and allowed, then it's allowed. If it's not, it needs to be corrected so that it fits within those ordinances or parameters, which we do have. Any other discussion, commissioners? It sounds like the applicant is willing to comply with the staff report and the conditions therefore set.
Just briefly,
make this comply.
Just briefly, I think that in general terms, we'd rather see cities in general would rather see something rather than vacant lots, right? And we need to find ways to make projects like this work. And I think that gives credence to what was mentioned earlier with the infill provision. I still contend what I said earlier, that if, the applicant here asked for a magic marker to draw on. I don't have that, but I still contend that side setback being considered a front lot is not a front lot. I know they don't want it, but I'm saying, the applicant, I would, if I had my magic marker, I would draw that for that to be a side setback for you. And I would argue that in a meeting like this all day long. And I won't do that for the sake of time here, but.
Yeah, it sounds like
Commissioner, when you want to start rewriting some of these ordinances, we'll let you do it.
No.
In the meantime, we'll continue to interpret them for you.
Thank you. No, that was no criticism on city staff.
I know.
Right? I know. But I'm going to come to a different conclusion on my interpretation, I think, than you. And if I had to reach for the moon to do it, I would do it. But I don't think that's a front yard setback.
I want to make sure I'm not confused. When they were talking about the length of hammerhead or whatever it is, that's going to be looked at and reviewed to make sure it meets the standards we've set up for the city. So it's just not, okay, I just wanted to make sure.
This is Commissioner Nancaro. Having heard all this and really getting an idea of, how long that the applicant has been trying to look at this property and trying to find some way to make it work with this, clearly dead end street that's been a dead end for many years and was approved at some time ago by, previous city council or planning commission. I don't see any reason under current ordinances why this design can't work as long as they meet all, it's a lengthy list of conditions of approval. I mean, having said all that, I would like to make a motion that we grant preliminary approval of the Majors Mini Farm subdivision subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report with the one change on bullet 6, changing it from lot 3 to lot 2.
Commissioner Carroll, can I clarify your motion? Did you intend to include all the provisions as mentioned by staff? Because the applicant had agreed to those.
Well, those conditions of approval, I think, are all of the ones that I think they're included in the staff report.
Okay.
Everything that Brandon Bell covered, with the exception, the only difference is on bullet 6, where it says lot 3, it should say lot 2. But I don't think he mentioned anything other than what was specifically already laid out in the written staff report conditions of approval.
That's accurate.
So if you need me to clarify it, I'll say it again, just that I would make a motion that we grant preliminary approval of Majors Mini Farm subdivision subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report, with the exception of lot 3 being lot 2 in bullet number 6.
Second. From Commissioner Mason.
So did you second that motion, Commissioner Mason?
I did.
Okay. We have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? If not, we'll begin with Commissioner Waite.
Yes.
Commissioner Mason.
Yes.
Commissioner Barker.
Yes.
Commissioner Arner.
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt.
Yes.
And Commissioner Nancaro.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that will move on, and the applicant can work with staff to meet the staff report and go on then to final. All right, I got to get back to our agenda here. All right, moving on to item number 10. Subdivision Ordinance 2020-17, consideration and action regarding the preliminary approval of the Coldwater Meadows Subdivision Phase 3, located at approximately 900 East and 2200 North. Presenter Brandon Bell. Brandon?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Recognize it's been a long evening already, and these two subdivisions have a relatively small number of lots, but a number of details to them. So I'll try to be quick on this one as well. This is again the Coldwater Meadows subdivision Phase 3. It only has 3 lots. The acreage on it is 2.05 acres. The zoning, it currently is partially in 2 zones. The R1 12.5 and the RE 20 zones. I believe it's on the agenda tonight to be proposed. The remainder of the property is proposed to be rezoned to the R1 12.5. Looks like I've got a typo on the zone there. It should read R1 12.5. So the also, sorry, I have another typo. My apologies. The applicant, it states that the applicant's requesting final approval in this background paragraph. It's actually, the applicant's actually requesting preliminary approval. And this is for, again, so it's located at approximately 900 East and 2175 North, the subdivision. And then just as I mentioned with the last subdivision, there is a portion of a lot on this that is a portion of a lot, or a lot from a prior property is being included in this, proposed to be included in this subdivision. But then it's being expanded in size. So they're kind of pulling one of the older lots and expanding its size and making it a part of this subdivision. That's their proposition. So staff recommends regarding that rezone, that the rezoning of the entire property to be in the R1 12.5 zone should be a condition of approval. There's a requirement of a minimum lot size of 12,500 square feet in that zone, and for interior lots, and 13,500 square feet on corner lots, with a lot width requirement of 100 feet at the 30-foot setback. The lot widths have been verified to meet that 100 lot width requirement for this zone. However, there is one of the lots that's just like very slightly under the requirement for a corner lot. It needs to be increased in size to meet that. It's literally like 5 square feet, but we need to meet the ordinance. So, and then the easements, there are easements, I believe, shown on the side and rear property lines. Those should be removed from the plat unless they're actually needed for utilities, and staff recommends that as a condition of approval, which is typical for other subdivisions as well. Let's see. The lot that's partially included in phase 2 is currently lot 12R in that phase, and it's being proposed to now be converted to lot 24 in this phase. Staff's recommendation as a condition of approval is that the applicant will need to amend the phase 2 plat. And then, just as we recommended in the last subdivision, that the applicant needs to work with staff to find the best way to do so. As a related note, the city engineer has stated that based on its location and the increase in size, it's only got a very small corner and tip of the proposed lot 24 that has a portion of Coldwater Creek in it, or the bank for Coldwater Creek. And based on that increase in size, it doesn't need to be considered an R lot per the city engineer. There is a temporary turnaround in place on the west side of the subdivision. And Lynn, if you could pull up the subdivision so they have a visual, I think that would be helpful. Sorry, I didn't state that earlier. Appreciate your assistance on that. And staff, let's see. Staff recommends, with regards to that turnaround, as a condition of approval, that the applicant needs to have an easement agreement for the temporary turnaround recorded against the property at the county prior to or at the same time as the recording of the subdivision, and provide a copy of that agreement to the city attorney prior to signing and recording the easement agreement. We need to just make sure that these turnarounds are maintained and they don't have weeds or other plants growing up tall so that they can't actually be used as a turnaround. And that the fire marshal has raised that issue. And so staff has recommended that as a condition of approval, that the turnaround is maintained. And staff will work, staff's recommendations that we be allowed to work that out with the applicant in the best manner prior to final approval or consideration for final approval. The fire marshal also recommended that a note does need to be placed on the plat that a fire sprinkler system is required for any home larger than 6,200 square feet. There was, I believe, a note on the last phase that was a smaller level, a smaller square footage, but that doesn't need to apply to this phase. And then there was a fire hydrant that was supposed to be installed in the last phase of the subdivision, in which the fire marshal pointed out had not been installed. The applicant needs to install that fire hydrant in this phase to meet fire safety requirements as a condition of approval. And once that, there is, however, what's called a blow off, which allows reduction of pressure in the prior phase. And once the fire hydrant is put into this phase, the applicant can get rid of the existing blow off in the last phase. And then finally, there was a trail connection that was missed in phase 2. I believe that went through in 2013 or 2014, that phase. There, if you notice in Exhibit E, though, it doesn't, that trail doesn't prevent, the trail segment that was missed doesn't prevent any of the critical connections that they're looking for. There was sort of redundant connections. And so given this is 3 lots and that subdivision, the phase 2 has already been approved, any attempt to take, to install a small section of trail in this would essentially be maybe 100-foot or 90-foot trail to nowhere. And so staff, the Parks and Recreation Department would like to not pursue attempting connecting that portion of the trail through this property, since there's other connections that go up to Barker Park and Oaklawn Park in the area that are planned and that are on the general plan map. So some of the considerations you should look at is, does it meet the requirements of the applicable zoning and subdivision ordinances? And is it consistent with the general plan? The recommended conditions of approval, I'm gonna forego reading them. I think I've covered all of them in my verbal report so far. If you have any questions in them, regarding them, they're should all be there. I guess, yeah, I just need to check one thing. But other than that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission grant preliminary approval of the Coldwater Meadows subdivision phase 3, subject to the conditions that I've covered in the staff report and that are present in this written staff report and the engineer's report and the applicable technical review committee letter. I think that covers all of my comments, unless you have any further questions.
Thanks, Brandon. Any other questions, commissioners, for this? I should say any questions rather than any other, but if not, I'd like to invite the applicant up to the podium that we don't have. So, is the applicant with us tonight?
Yes, John Hanson, go ahead and state your address.
John Hanson, 1165 West, 4000 North in Pleasant View. So I would like to comment regarding this Coldwater's phases 1 and 2. When the sellers, the Barkers, decided to sell this, we had all of those 2 phases were zoned RE12. And we had a preliminary drawing that took in all of the Barker property, that also the lots conformed in RE12, 1,000 square feet. I see there's been some of the residents that RW Custom has built homes in there. And I want to assure the residents, as I look at the plat, especially lots 21 through 13, most of those are 12,500 to 12,800 square foot lots. So the current residents are already living, for the majority of them, on 12,500 square foot lots. And so I just think this next phase is a no-brainer as far as that we'll have lots larger than 12,500, but that's all I have to say. This is phase 3, probably of a 6 or 7 phase project over the next 10 years. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
No, just our standard question, Johnny, is do you agree with the staff report, conditions of approval based on the staff report?
I didn't know about the fire hydrant. We'll take care of that. I'm not sure if RW Custom did those improvements or whether I had caused them to be done for the Barkers, but we'll certainly stand tall on anything that needs to be done, and especially the turnaround at the top. We'll make sure that's taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant? Let's go ahead and invite the public to comment on this. If there's any comments, please raise your hand or type in the chat if you would.
Okay, first we have Bradley Shira. Bradley, if you'd state your address.
Hi there, good evening, ma'am and sirs of the Planning Commission. I live at 2128 North, 800 East, here in the subdivision in question. I think my concern, and I think all the people I've talked to, residents, is this. If you notice, just 2 blocks south of us, south of 2100 on street 1975 North. If you go down that street as a resident, I'm not a planner, I'm not a developer, but you look at that street, these homes are jammed into these small lots. There's virtually little room between them, and they're a short distance from the street. And there are all different styles of homes on that street, and the neighborhood looks there is just terrible. That's my view. I think a lot of others. If you go from the northeast of here, around 2850 North to 1385 East, that's where I used to live, up about 2 miles away from here. You have newer homes that are so large, they look down and over the existing homes on the next street. They look out of place, and again, it looks terrible. These neighborhoods do not make North Ogden appealable. And that's what we want to avoid. These big lots, these big homes, which are being proposed tonight. We have all invested our money and time to be a part of the community that have a similar lot size and patio style home, thus maintaining similar economic value, curb appeal, and housing uniformity. And this is a unique subdivision. We want to see that maintained. We don't want a lot of huge homes in there as proposed on these big lots, all double the size that we have, nor do we want to have small lots, which it doesn't sound like the developer is going to do. But that's our concern. I think I've talked to everybody in the neighborhood. We sent the appeal into you, we've signed it. That's our concerns, that these big lots, these big homes, we want to have the uniformity, consistency of a great neighborhood. So when people drive into it, they don't say, wow, that's out of place, doesn't look right. We like it how it is now. We'd like to continue that. So that's our presentation to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question to the applicant? Or not to the applicant, sorry, to the comment that was just made, to the gentleman who just made the comment?
Let's get through the public comments, and then we can address them all at once.
Okay.
Remember, this public comment is not supposed to be a back and forth with the public.
No, and I wanted further clarification on his comment. I wasn't looking for.
Oh, yeah, if you could like clarification, you could ask him that.
Okay, so my question was, first of all, it's pretty uncommon that people object to larger lot sizes. This is the first time since I've been on the Planning Commission I've heard that. I understand, I think, where your concern is coming from, but what size lots?
I don't necessarily think it's the bigger lot size, the bigger home. And I know that they're not presented what size home they want, but I know they want to put 2 or 3 story homes on, and that's just what we've heard from the proposed people wanting to move in there. But it's not so much the lot size, it's what's going to go on those big lots. Out of place, so much different than the rest of our homes, making the dynamics of the whole community different.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next is James Barker. James, would you state your address?
Yeah, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Barker, 763 East, 2550 North Ogden. Brad, I would actually be your neighbor. We've met. As far as the lot size go, the reason for the increase in the lot size was to get away from the creek. My wife is adamant on adding a basement and putting in a cold storage. That's something that we've always wanted. But as far as having a 2-story home, even a 3-story home, that's not going to happen. It'll be something that conforms with the neighborhood. It won't look like there's a modern house in that neighborhood that looks way out of place. But as far as the house looks, it's going to look a lot like yours. So
and that's why we want a basement, is so we do conform with that look of the neighborhood. We're not looking to build a 10,000 square foot home. It will be very similar to that blue house that will be next to us.
Exactly.
Just with a basement. I'd rather put a basement in than go 2 stories up. to make it look out of place.
Yeah, and if you're and as far as like square footage for the house, it's not going to be anything bigger than 4,500 square feet. Right now, everybody in that neighborhood, it's 3,500 square feet and less. Probably realistically at most, it'll be 4,000 square feet. So we're not going to be a massive home. That first home you see as you turn on to 2100 North on the opposite south side of the street. So it's not going to look that big, of course. It's not going to look much bigger than anybody else's. We might change the neighborhood up a little bit because we do have young kids. So that'll be something new. There might be some noise, but
they're fun.
You'll like them. Can guarantee that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Amy Lindblom. I hope I'm saying that right. Go ahead, Amy.
I think, can you hear me? I had to unmute myself.
Yes.
Yes.
I live at 867 East, 2175 North. I am the newest homeowner in this wonderful, wonderful neighborhood. I've only lived here 6 months, and I'm so happy, overjoyed to be in this neighborhood. And I certainly never thought I'd have to be coming before the Planning Commission. Never have done so in my life. Never been a complainer, and I don't want to be perceived as a disrupting newcomer, because I so very much appreciate the Planning Commission. I appreciate RW Custom Homes and for the great neighborhood that they created for us. I so much appreciate the Barker family for the wonderful land that they have developed and grown, and the farming community. I don't know much about them, but I hear their name everywhere. And I can't imagine that they're nothing but a wonderful family. Like I said, I never thought I'd have to fight for my neighborhood, but I have put my life savings into this home. And I specifically chose to live in this neighborhood after many, many months of looking at other homes and other neighborhoods in Ogden and North Ogden. I very much am pro-growth, well-planned growth. I'm not a close the door behind me kind of person, and nobody else can come in. But this street and this neighborhood is pretty unique, and it's occupied on both 875 East and 2175 North by single people like myself, and or two people, and 90% of the people, or even more, are retired. No children live in this neighborhood on this street, but plenty of grandchildren visit. And I'm not anti-children. I have two wonderful children of my own. We simply want to keep our neighborhood and completed with homes that the developer created. I think you've read from my letter. The developer planned, marketed, sold these types of homes, small family patio homes, and he did such a great job. And we would just like to see that continued into the other phases. And Brad and his wife, and I agree with everybody else, when you start creating bigger homes or allowing bigger homes to be built, if you build it, they will come. It's like the field of dreams. So if you allow it, it will happen. And it's just a unique neighborhood that we'd like to maintain. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't see any more hands. Oh,
Okay.
one more just popped up. Jed Barker. Go ahead, Jed, with your address.
So I'm currently at 2299 Fruitland Drive. I'd like to ditto James's comments. I'll be the property owner of lot 25. James will be lot 24. And I plan on building a basement with a main level. Total square footage would approximately be 4,000 square feet. So the site plan, each level would be 2,000 square feet, which would actually be smaller than most of the houses that are currently there. So the aerial view, you'd actually have a smaller footprint than the current houses. But we are going to make sure that our houses blend well into the current houses there. That's all.
Thank you.
John Hanson would like to address.
Okay. Are we done with it? There's no more public?
No, go ahead, John.
Okay. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to Bradley and to Amy. I certainly understand your concern in that unique neighborhood that has been created there. However, you do not have an owners association. You're not in a PRUD. What you've described is what different communities have, where they control the architecture, the size of the homes. But in where you bought your home, there are no CC&Rs. I don't know if custom homes put restrictions on the size or the color of the front, but you really bought a lot, just a regular lot like you could buy anywhere. And it's just happened that that concept has really caught on for older people because they want a 3-car garage or they like the neighborhood. I certainly understand that, but your choice of a lot does not protect you from other people building around you. And so, you know, I empathize with you. I've known the Barkers for a while. They want to have a place for their children on the land they've owned for 100 years to build a house. That's pretty simple. So that's my comments, that you're not in a PRUD. You're in a regular residential subdivision. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks, John. Commissioners, discussion? Well, let's go ahead and have a discussion on this item.
One difficulty I've been having is trying to see this unique neighborhood on Google Maps, and I think it's so new, it's not there. I haven't driven through this neighborhood.
No, it's not. It's on the Weber County Gizmo if you use that.
I don't use the Weber County Gizmo, but I am interested in keeping, when we have a zoning ordinance change like this, one of the principles we abide by is, it must either transition slowly or blend with a concurrent zone, right? And so this application is to go down from RE20 down to, and make the lot sizes smaller to R112, correct? If I'm wrong?
Yeah.
So right now, without this application, we could be doing a subdivision review on much larger lots, first of all. But I am interested in seeing how it blends. And this, we are at a disadvantage here where I haven't physically been there and it's so new that I can't see it from space. So I am, although I'm inclined to believe that the R112, not looking at the type of homes that are built or going to be built, if I just look at the zoning, I do think R112 is a good zone for that area because I think it blends nicely between what's currently on Fruitland Drive there and what I can see from the new subdivision, and it seems to be the right zone. If I were just to be plain farm bill and zone this area, I think I would recommend R112, which is what the application's for. Those are my comments.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes if you use the county's GeoGizmo, you can look at the satellite views that are more current. It's on there. There is 3 lots in there that look like they're half acre or a little bit bigger already in that subdivision, but for the most part, it's all uniform and that. But again, going back to, from us as a planning commission is, we're zoning, zoning the ground and approving a subdivision. We have nothing to do with the houses that get built. My only suggestion to any applicants or residents would be to plead with the builder or developer to put some restrictive covenants in there or ask for some that keep that uniformity, but it sounds like already that may happen, or at least the people proposing the houses, but that's not up for debate or discussion for us. What gets built there simply doesn't comply with the subdivision ordinance process.
and this doesn't give everyone a lot of confidence because there are obviously exceptions, but in general terms, the person building a house wants to build a house that's somewhat congruent with the rest. I mean, nobody wants to be the fish swimming upstream, you know. So in general terms, nature kind of keeps those things, you know, in harmony to some extent.
Yeah.
Well,
that's no promise. That's no promise from anything, but. You know.
Well, it's, yeah, so anybody can go in and buy 3 lots in a subdivision if they want and build a big house out of place too. So.
Yeah, I've known people that have done that. Yeah, one of the comments, and this right now we're just talking about the subdivision, but we'll also be talking about the rezone. If we don't rezone, if we do leave it alone, it's half-acre lots minimum. It's RE20 zone, which is even bigger lots. And so,
yeah, and 2 of the lots already, 2 of the 3 lots comply with that zone as well. So.
Yes, they do. I mean, one's 7/10 of an acre and the other one is 8/10 of an acre. And then the one is truly, you know, it's just over the 12,500 square feet. And it's interesting to me because the common thought is more property is, and maybe it is in a lot of places, that everybody who has a large lot wants to build a large house. And some people just want elbow room. And we've kind of gotten away from that around here. I mean, I'm looking to build, I will be, you know, next year building another house. And I'm building on an acre and it's a 4,000 square foot house. Because I want room. I don't want to hear my neighbor cough and, you know, every time they argue and shut the door, slam the door or whatever. There are a lot of more people out there who do want that elbow room. And in this case, the 2 Barkers that we talked to who will be building on these 2 larger lots are very interested in having, you know, just room for their kids to run around in. I just think it's really interesting. Like I said, if we don't do anything, they will all be big lots.
Yeah.
You know, this is Commissioner Nancaro. Maybe I'm confused, but on the RW custom neighborhood that's currently exists there now, isn't the lot size like 12,500 as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that basically so we're looking to rezone the surrounding this new proposal to be the same size lot. Am I reading this wrong? Or?
I think
yes. Tonight though, the application tonight is the preliminary plat. The application for rezone hasn't come through. I know. Right. The application doesn't have the rezone attached to it. That's why we're not having a public hearing or a rezone discussion.
So we don't know what the request for lot size will be. Okay.
Yes, but as part of approval for the preliminary plat, if they want it to be this size, which has that 13,500 square foot lot, it will require the 12.5 zone. So that's one of the conditions of approval. Right. So just knowing
if we do nothing, then they're actually much bigger lots.
Yes. Technically, you look at it, and they could adjust that one single lot to be 20,000 square feet,
correct,
or whatever a corner lot's required to be in the RE20 zone, and just leave it as RE20. So
right.
Well, but even if we agreed that this wasn't the right layout, I don't necessarily know we have the teeth to deny this, based on the fact that the lots are bigger than the minimum requirement for the zone, right? I mean, we can say, hey, that's too small for the zone, but I don't think the Planning Commission has the authority to say that lot's too big for that zone. I don't know of any statute where we would have the authority to do anything about that.
No, you're correct.
I understand, but just listening to the concerns of, you know, the neighbors that are there, I guess where the confusion comes in is, it seems to me that the R1 12.5 zone really is compatible with the zone, with the lot sizes that are currently in the RW custom neighborhood currently.
Yeah, everything that I think, you know, is leaning me to think that this should be approved. And where I think there's value in this meeting still is hopefully it gives some talking points to the neighbors, you know, and they're able to address what their concerns are to the developer. I don't see the planning commission having authority to necessarily side with those comments, and I think this application should be approved. But hopefully, it starts a dialogue, and the two sides can see each other's points. And I think those were clearly stated tonight. So I think there was some good to come out of it. But I'm ready to recommend approval of this.
Did we? I just saw a note. Sorry, I might be off on the agenda that. Which, if it did, then we got to have all the comments again. So I had said the rezone is not there, but Lynn just texted me, said that it's the next agenda item. So you can see how far in the future I'm paying attention tonight.
Yeah. However, I feel like it's immaterial.
Yes, it is. So there'll be some continued discussion. So I guess let's really, as far as the subdivision plat is concerned, if there's no more discussion on that, let's entertain a motion. Again, the applicant is willing to conform to the recommendations from staff for the approval of the subdivision. And, this is probably one of those, I apologize, we probably should have just had the public hearing first to hear the public, because it's going to be the same things. But as far as the subdivision is concerned,
well, Eric, I can move that we table this until after the public hearing if you'd like.
If you feel like you want to do that and vote on the subdivision preliminary approval.
It might streamline the process just if there are any, I'd hate for us to approve this and then hear public comments towards that, right? I mean, because they're going to get their say on the next item. So it might streamline that process.
Whether it's welcome to table it till after item 11.
So
that would
I'd
be
like
fine.
I move we table this until after item 11.
Okay, we have a motion to move.
Noting that some discussion's already taken place.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second to move item number 10, following item number 11 after the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, well, I probably could have planned that a little bit better. Being that item 11's on the next page, I didn't even notice that. So let's go ahead to move item number 11, which is a legislative item and a recommendation to the city council. Zone map amendment 2020-7, the public hearing, consideration and recommendation regarding the rezone of the land located at approximately 2175 North, 850 East from RE20 to R112.5.
I'm going to ask permission to include myself for 11 as well, since you kind of put them together.
Okay.
You kind of combined them, so I'll just listen in if that's okay.
Okay. Rob, anything more you'd like to add that we haven't already discussed prior to our public hearing?
Well, let me just share with you a couple things. One of them is that this is, unlike the previous item, which is an administrative item, this is a legislative item, and it requires the city council's approval to change the zoning designation on the map. So the existing designation is RE20, and the request is for R1-12.5. So a minimum of 12,500 square foot lots on interior lots, 13,500 square feet on corner lots. The general plan, I've given you a staff report that identifies the circumstances surrounding this request. As far as the general plan is concerned, the general plan map calls for this property to be developed as low density residential. And it's also within, in the general plan, is in the Coldwater neighborhood. The low density residential in our general plan basically allows for R18 through RE20 lots. So it's a pretty wide array with respect to that. I've given you an assessment of the general guidelines that are associated with this request, as far as the density. We've already talked about the fact that this property is similar, would be a similar zone to the existing properties that are developed, that in the future there's additional land that will undoubtedly be developed as well. I think that's pretty well the sum and substance of it. So the summary of considerations: is the proposal consistent with the general plan, and how does the proposal relate to the zoning and land use policy guidelines? Our recommendation on this one is to conduct a public hearing, receive public comment, consider the general plan rezoning guidelines, and make a recommendation to the city council. Staff recommends approval of the rezone from RE20 to R1 12.5. We believe that the Planning Commission can find that this application is consistent with the general plan. And I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Rob. I think the only question I have prior to opening a public hearing is, where we kind of opened up public comment on the item before, is it safe to say if the public would like to they wouldn't need to repeat themselves for their comment to be on record, but simply stand up and say, my comments for item number 10 equally go with item 11. So they don't feel like they need to go through the whole process again just to make sure it's under item 11.
I think that's a good approach, that you do need to open the public hearing.
Yes.
Prior to our opening the public hearing, I'd like to just make a comment, Eric.
Okay.
Just let's hold our comments. So when we, and this is, I'm not criticizing anything, but just to avoid a back and forth, like I almost was accused of getting into, and was not my intention. We just want to keep our comments addressed to the Planning Commission. So even if let's not address the applicant, let's not address the comments, let's address the Planning Commission. That way we will avoid someone having to rebut those things. And it keeps
okay.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and open the public hearing at this time for Zone Map Amendment 2020, the public hearing for the rezone of RE20 to R112 at 2175 North, 850 East. Again, since we took public comment on item number 10, if anybody would like to just express their comments that were made for item 10 to apply to item 11, we'll make sure that they're recorded on the record for both items. That way you don't have to, if anybody feels like they don't want to repeat themselves or in the sense of time, we would appreciate that. I would just make note that now in this public comment, in this public hearing, that we do have noted that the comments for Amy Lindblom has just mentioned that the houses in the area are 2,000 square feet to 2,700 square feet. None have basements. And her comments, that was her comments for item number 10, and she's chatted that they are the same for this item. Appreciate you doing that, Amy. Now, if there's any other public comments, we are in the public hearing, so raise your hand or express a chat. We'd love to hear from you.
We have Bradley Shure again.
Okay.
Hi there, folks, again. Just want to reiterate that the comments I made before are still valid for this this number, I think number 11, is it? So just make them concurrent with this proposal here. I don't have too much change in it. I think what we heard from the Barkers was indeed good. If they want to conform to our the home size and condition, that's great. But move my comments on both points there. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well stated. Thanks.
That's the only hand I see, Eric.
Okay. Well, Lynn, if we just, or in our record, let's just make sure that as we record this, that the public comments for both item 10 and 11 should be considered together.
Okay.
I just felt like when we were in 10, it was kind of going more of that public hearing time than this. So that was my mistake for missing this second page. No more public comments. I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion, a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? All right, so discussion for this zone map amendment from RE20 to R112. Any other discussion, commissioners? This is a recommendation to City Council.
Well, I think on this one, from the comments we heard, the last thing the residents, the neighboring residents who spoke would like is for this to stay RE20, because that opens the door for the biggest of the homes. This at least, this will put a cap in there, and I think it's the right transition to move upward. I mean, I think it's the right transition zone for this. I really do. Like I said earlier, I felt like if I was designing the city, given what it's currently had, and you asked me what zone should be overlaid there, I'd say RE12 or 112. I think it will transition better to the infill that will happen to the north or around it. I'm sorry, and I think it's the right zone.
I would agree, and it is in conformance with our general plan that to be this zone in that area. Any other comments from Commissioner?
I'm just gonna, this is Commissioner Nancarrow. I'm just gonna reiterate, maybe it was jumping ahead to the zone, but as I look at the neighborhood where the neighbors have such a concern in the RW custom neighborhood, it's currently zoned R1 12.5. And I guess what I got from their comments is they want us to keep a similar size, a similar feel in the surrounding neighborhood as the neighborhood expands. And it seems to me that changing it from RE20 to R1 12.5 is just keeping it as consistent as we can.
No, I really appreciate it. I agree with you. And sorry, I appreciated the comments though. I meant what I said when I said it was the first time I've heard someone advocate that the lot sizes should be smaller and have a valid reason for it. And that did not fall on deaf ears. Definitely heard that, and I can take that into further consideration into the future. So that was an excellent point that was made. But I do think that R112 is the right. So sorry to cut you off there, Don.
I do too. I think this is really in keeping with, I think everybody wins. I think this is what everybody wants. So are you ready for a motion?
Yeah, I move that we recommend to City Council that this property be rezoned to R112 as noted, with the conditions as laid out in the staff report.
I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for a positive recommendation to the City Council. Any other discussion? All right, let's begin with Commissioner Mason.
Yes.
Commissioner Barker is abstaining. Commissioner Arner?
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt?
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Waite?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that positive zone change recommendation will move on to City Council. Now let's go back onto our amended agenda, back to item number 10, subdivision ordinance 2020-17. Consideration and action regarding the preliminary approval of the Coldwater Meadows subdivision, phase 3, located at 900 East, 2200 North. We have had the presentation and discussion on this from the applicant and public comment. So we're just going back to our commissioner discussion prior to a motion. Any other discussion on this subdivision?
In this one, to me, that the zoning was clear, that it should be the same zoning as the neighboring zone. That was clear. Now, should the lot sizes be similar? Well, that's, even if that were debatable, I don't see that we have the teeth to enforce smaller lots than, I just don't see that as part of our authority to enforce that. So that point was well made, again, by the comments. I do think the applicant is well within his rights to apply for those larger pieces of property. And in general terms, that's very much desired by the residents of the city. We have people that stand up and they're very passionate about open space and keeping lot sizes big and not wanting the city to get denser with people. And so, but I don't see that we have the teeth to grant that wish at all. And I feel like this should be approved as well for for that reason.
I just would like to make note too that this is in addition to the previous phase. The road already has the bend and built in it. So in order to change a lot size, you'd actually have to remove some city street that's already been built and part of a previous phase to continue the road a little bit further east. Again, those larger lots are what back up against the creek and the other area. So it's kind of established already, the distance away from there. Much like there's like I mentioned, 3 other lots in the subdivision that are half acre or larger, just simply due to geography of making the lots fit. So again, I appreciate the public comments in there. I think it's a great subdivision. And, it sounds like the residents that are in there would like future development to be restricted through some CC&Rs. And I would recommend that to the residents that they pursue that with the developer to pursue the like kind continuation of what a great neighborhood they have.
I'll make a motion that we grant preliminary approval of the Coldwater Meadows subdivision phase 3, subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report, the engineer's report, and the applicable technical review committee letter.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's see, we're down to Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Waite,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
and it's noted that Commissioner Barker is abstaining, and I vote yes. All right. Item number 12. Back to legislative zone map amendment 2018-3, discussion regarding sensitive lands map. Rob, you can do this if you're going to keep it short. Otherwise, we're pushing you to a different agenda.
Well, I would like to have Lauren Gardner give you a little primer on some of the significance of what's incorporated into our environmental section of the code. So I'm going to suggest that let's hold off on this. I do want to move the sensitive lands amendment as quickly as we can. At the very least, I want it to be ready to be incorporated into our land use code, if not before.
Okay. So you're saying we're going to hold off on this then?
I think so. Given the late hour, I'd like everybody to be fresh when we talk about this one.
All right, I appreciate that.
But I appreciate if you would take a look at the map. We're basically looking at those, there's some developed lands, but undeveloped lands to the north and also the east.
Guys, I'm all in favor of tabling this as well, but I just want to make sure that we still have 5 people attending of the public. I just want to make sure that somebody didn't hang around for 3 hours, right?
That is a good comment. I will push through if the public are in attendance for this item.
Can we get a raised hand if somebody was attending for this item?
I don't see any hands.
I know I appreciate the map being there so that I know the general plan steering committee has been asking, talking about this as well. So this map that you've done, Rob, would do some great help for clarifying to everybody where this overlay would apply.
Thank you.
Well, if that's the case, I would entertain a motion to table this agenda item to a future meeting.
2 tables in 1 meeting will be a new record, I think, right?
Well, we just adjusted the agenda before. We didn't table because we still did it tonight.
I used the word table.
Hey, use it again then.
Okay, I move we table this item for a future meeting when it fits in the time slot.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second to table item number 12, zone map amendment 2018, discussion regarding sensitive land map. to a future agenda item. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Remarks from planning commissioners. Any remarks from commissioners? Except for Commissioner Mason. Just kidding.
Am I that long-winded? I'm not. Am I long-winded, or do I like the sound of my own voice?
I think he's being kind, Brandon. I think he's being kind. Hey, Mr. Chairman, I hate to interrupt, but I just want to thank all of you for your dedication and service to the city. And I know meetings like this sometimes can be trying, but it's just evidence to me of your dedication to serve. And I just want to say thank you and wish you all a great holiday season. And may all your dreams come about, which I hope is the end of this pandemic.
You too, Mayor. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there's no other commissioner comments, I just appreciate all the time you guys have put in this year, and hope you all have a happy holiday and a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, move we adjourn.
Well, anything from Rob?
I moved something.
Thank you, commissioners, for all your hard work, your diligence. It's a pleasure for our staff to work with you. We certainly wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanted to just give you one a compliment that is a part of when we hear people make comments and what have you, then I am appreciative of the fact that people care about their community. I was involved in a seminar the other day that had a different take on the term NIMBY instead of the one that we're most familiar with. Now I must become involved is the new NIMBY, and I think it's great that we have people that care about their community. It's a real special thing to be a part of North Ogden. Thank you.
Thank you. Brandon, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any comments?
Were you afraid I snuck away? I'm like, I'm
Well, I
tired.
thought, maybe you fell asleep or something.
No, I put it on mute when I was snoring. So no, yeah, I don't have any comments.
All right, thank you. John, you've been quiet tonight.
Yeah, nothing really. Obviously you've wrestled with some tough questions today, including some that deal with interpretations, and it's kind of a weird situation. Sometimes you guys don't get to see it a lot, but sometimes Rob and I have discussions where if it's legal, he has to defer to me, and if it's interpretive, I defer to him, and it's just part of the process. So
and both of you are saying, what's Commissioners Thomas and Mason going to say about this?
No. In fact, I actually feel like it's a very healthy process when you think out loud like this group does, because it helps everyone in the room see, that it's not just a cut and paste approval that's happening. It's something more that you guys are doing as a group. So it's good for everybody, I think. And other than that, just happy holidays.
No, thank you. Now, do we qualify as critical workforce? So we are farther up on the list for the vaccine? I think if we don't get the vaccine, I think if we don't get the vaccine, we're not going to be able to fix Washington Boulevard and 2700 intersection. So I think everybody would deem that necessary. Well, thanks, guys. Commissioner Mason motion to adjourn a few minutes ago. Now we'll wait to hear a second.
I'll second it.
All right. Motion and second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Merry Christmas.
Hey,
Enjoy your
this will be the
holidays.
first time you hear this, but see you guys next year, huh?
Yeah. Happy holidays. Everybody stay safe.
Yeah.
All right.
You too,
Thanks,
thanks.
guys. See ya.